There we go. Now I've got a microphone. I know everybody wants to hear me. This is a subcommittee of the Historic Zoning Commission. Our meeting today is designed to be informal and to guide applicants through the process of obtaining a certificate of appropriateness, which we also refer to as a COA, for projects within the city's historic districts, given the historic design guidelines. Applicant participation in DRC meetings is always voluntary but highly recommended. Changes that any of the applicants make or suggestions taken coming out of this meeting are the applicant's choice, but whatever we say here today doesn't guarantee you're going to get approved by the Historic Zoning Commission at the voting meeting. It's just suggestions and advice and guidance. So we have 10 items on today's agenda. This one promises to be a little bit longer meeting than some of the other ones we've had. When you are called, if you would introduce yourself and generally describe your item in 2 to 3 minutes, we'll get some feedback from staff, and then we will weigh in and give you our thoughts. So without further ado.
With one little ado.
Okay.
I want to give kudos to our iconic woman.
Oh, great.
Chosen by Williamson Magazine. And just say to Mary, we love you, congratulations. And everything they said in here is absolutely true. You are such a credit to Williamson County and Franklin.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you.
And I want to know where your hat is.
Well, I will tell. Can I have 1 second?
Of course.
The day they were doing that and taking the photographs and interviewing people was the day that I was having no water in my kitchen because they were doing the sink. So I didn't get to wash my face or hair, and I decided a hat might be helpful.
I think it worked out.
Thank you.
Looked great. Good. Yep. Congratulations, Mary.
Thank you.
All right. Okay. And thank you, Lisa. All right. Now we will head on to item number 1 on the agenda, which is discussion of signage at 234 Public Square. And Tanya Hembry, if I've got that right. Great. Welcome.
Thank you. I'm Tanya Hembry and owner of the building. Perfect, thank you. Good afternoon, I'm Tanya Hembry. I own Onyx and Alabaster on the square just across the street in the white painted building that's shown on the screen, and also own the operating businesses within, so building owner occupied. I have requested signage in the black arches that exist on the building. Unlike most buildings, we don't have windows that are usable or ideal location for awnings. We have 3 operating businesses within that, and so we're really hoping to just be able to clearly identify what it is that we offer for the passersby that are walking Main Street. So,
Great. Thank you. All right, Elizabeth, I think this one is you.
Yes, thank you. So 234 Public Square sits in the historic square and was once home to the city's offices. The building at 234 Public Square offers one building facade that fronts the square. The zoning ordinance does not permit a combination of wall signs and band signs on one building facade, nor multiple wall signs on the same facade. The design guidelines align with the zoning ordinance as only one of the sign types is allowed, either a wall sign or band sign, on a building facade, and limits wall signs to 1 per facade as well. Their request for additional signage as submitted does not meet the design guidelines nor the zoning ordinance. And historically, it appears in the image that was provided, there were transoms above where has been infilled with the black arches. So the design guidelines do recommend avoiding concealing or disturbing original decorative designs, detailing windows, or transom glass. And the building currently has 4 signs, which is also the recommended maximum per building. So I guess staff would just like feedback on the submitted sign designs, as it does not align with the zoning ordinance or the historic design guidelines. The commission would not be able to approve as submitted, as it's limited by the zoning ordinance.
Okay, so before we kick it off and get folks' reaction, I think you just clarified it for me, but just to say it out loud, kind of regardless of what our thoughts are on the proposal, they are not in compliance with code at this point as proposed. Is that correct?
Yes.
Such that we could even if we liked it, that's not something we could approve because of the zoning ordinance.
Yes.
Okay. Before we go around and give feedback, do you want our feedback, given that it sounds like staff's indicating we couldn't, you know, approve a COA for it anyway because of the zoning ordinance requirements? Or do you want to talk with staff further about that?
Well, I guess my understanding was the administration could not approve it, and so this was the next escalation in the process for request. I wasn't told that it was a firm no to come and do this, so I guess I'm confused a little bit.
Sure,
Also,
well-
we only have one sign, so I'm not sure where 4 is mentioned.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I guess to kind of circle back, the design guidelines and the COA or whether what's proposed is consistent with the design guidelines for a property in the district. Then separately, there's regulation by the zoning ordinance, which we don't have purview to change or modify that. So I don't know, Elizabeth, do you want to?
Yeah, so I'll follow up. There is one wall sign on the building facade that was approved, I believe, 2018 or 2017. And then there are window signs and then 2 sandwich board signs as well. So that is 4 sign types for that building.
Which we're willing to remove any windows or sandwich boards, just to have clarity on the building. So I guess I didn't realize those qualified as additional options. I
Okay.
guess. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, well, does any of
So
the,
I guess
yeah.
this would be a good time to provide feedback on possibly other sign alternatives or ideas for updating signage in order to provide guidance to the applicant.
Okay, sounds good. Does anybody want to have thoughts and want to go first?
Thank you. Regarding the ordinance part of signage, if you could just clarify that so that we're not overstepping what we can or cannot do.
Yes, so the historic design guidelines are an additional limitation to what the zoning ordinance says. And so the zoning ordinance only permits either a band sign or a wall sign on one building facade. So currently, they have one wall sign there above the center door, and so they wouldn't be able to have a combination of additional band signs over the other entrances. And then wall signs are only limited to 1 per building facade as well, so she wouldn't be able to have additional wall signs that are classified.
And by band signs, I think I know what you mean by band signs, but could they have 2 band signs, did you say, but no wall sign? Based on the ordinance?
Let me double check. I believe band signs are limited to 1 per facade as well.
1, okay.
Yep, so the maximum is 1 per main entrance per retail storefront tenant space on the ground floor if no wall sign is present on the building for band signs.
Do you mind if I say something? So those are 2 separate entities altogether. So the Coffee Lounge and the Interior Design Mark are different LLCs. So those are different businesses within that one building.
Okay, and I think those are, from my perspective, and maybe I've got it wrong, those are really zoning ordinance requirements, as I understand it. If staff, y'all correct me if I've got that wrong, but that's where I think working through those issues with staff on what is logistically allowed based on the businesses in the building and the building structure itself would be a good thing, because we are not going to be able to alter that, I don't think. But Kelly, correct me, or Elizabeth, y'all correct me if I'm wrong.
That's correct. There may be some other sign types to consider, like a small projecting arm sign, or to change out the window signs to reflect the other businesses, but it really is limited by the storefront or that building facade.
Mary, did you have something?
Yeah, I think it's my turn.
Yeah, I
anyway,
think
but
it
I'm
is.
dying to say something. So the other, a couple of meetings ago, we approved a second sign at where Brand Metal is. How did that happen? They had one wall sign, and now they're doing a second projecting sign on the front.
So it's a projecting arm sign and a band sign.
And you can do that combination?
Yes. The
Okay.
limitation is wall signs and band signs can't be on the same facade. It's either a band sign, and this building really isn't set up for a band sign because it doesn't have fascia above the door. It's really an enclosed window.
Mm-hmm.
A wall sign is the one that's on this building, and you can have a one wall sign on that building facade.
And one projecting sign?
And a projecting sign.
Okay. Then the next question, in the picture, the former business had signs in the closed-in window transoms.
It did. That was under a previous
Yeah,
zoning
that's what I
ordinance and
thought.
previous design guidelines, yes.
But if I were you, I would want to.
That's partly why we planned it at the
Yeah, I
architectural
would want to
level.
understand that.
Yeah.
And I guess my feedback is, I think what you're proposing looks fine. I do. It's just that we don't have the ability to override the zoning ordinance.
What would you suggest as the
signage.
next step in the process, I guess?
Well, I think if you, and we'll get the other commissioners' feedback, I think if you, given the limitations, I would suggest you work with staff and understand the full menu of what signage is available. And that could theoretically include changing the building sign you have now to be something different. But I would just say, work with staff to understand exactly what's permitted under the code. And then once you all have that worked out, then there's a lot more meaningful feedback the DRC can give on the COA application for the ultimate signage, is my take on it. But
Yeah, and I don't really understand if the applicant wanted to seek going to the Board of Zoning Appeals, can you get a variance on signage, or is the way the ordinance written, you must comply to the sign standards?
Variances can be issued for signage. It's extremely rare because there usually is another sign alternative that's possible for the property. And there would need to be something truly unique and unusual about the property itself.
And I
Got
would
it.
say, and then I'm done, what is unique about this situation is that they are two different businesses. And I would just recommend that you emphasize that aspect, which is unusual from other presentations we've had, in order to see if you could gain some kind of variance or a greater understanding of what it is that you're asking for.
Okay.
right. And if you do, I mean, just to clarify, we wouldn't be the ones approving the variance if you were to seek a variance. That would be the
Yeah.
Board of Zoning Appeals, as I understand it. Maybe it's different, but, okay, Brian, any thoughts?
Well, the only question is kind of that I have for clarification. So the onyx and alabaster, the OA, that's above the main entrance.
Yes.
So currently, that is the only sign that's allowed on the facade as a type of band sign.
Do you want to answer?
So it was approved as a wall sign.
So it is a wall sign. And there can't, so that is the wall sign for the facade.
Yes, it is limited to one per building facade.
If I'm assuming those are plywood, if those plywood panels were removed and transoms put back, glass, I mean, would that make any difference as far as the type of sign? If it were like actually on glass, would that change as a substrate different than the plywood? Or would it still be a wall sign?
If they applied signage to the transoms, that would be a window sign.
It would be a window sign and not a wall sign.
Yeah, because it would be applied to the glass.
And that would be allowed to do what they're asking.
I believe so. With the updated window sign, they would just need to not exceed the maximum sign area coverage for window signs, and it doesn't have any limitations to being placed within the transoms.
And that would be more in keeping with its historic character because it did have, they're different. They're not the same sizes, but at least it would be something going back similar to that.
Yeah, yeah.
And I noticed it looked like even on
And
the
they
side.
had it.
Originally, yes. The previous business was wood because all we did was paint what was there.
Right.
So they had already changed it and still had signs on that.
And they've changed the entire look of that facade.
Facade.
Because they look like they could actually even be doors that went in, they're just large windows.
Yeah.
When that was a garage bay for the city fire truck.
Yeah.
And then the other side, I think, was the police department.
Yep.
So they won't be quite the same, but it would be enough similar that you'd think to the historic character of that building.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess my mention was the previous business that just moved out a few years ago had the wood panels there.
But they came under a different ordinance.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
guidelines have changed since then.
Yeah.
Not
the
our
zoning ordinance.
guidelines,
The
the
zoning
zoning
ordinance.
ordinance, yes.
Okay.
And that would be my only thing to consider. I will say that you have a jewel in that you have the original city hall sign on your building.
I know, and I don't
I'm-
want to cover it up by
Good.
replacing
I would
that
like-
center sign, so that's why I'm also limited to space in that center sign to put
Yeah.
anything bigger. So it's been a whole thing.
Yes, we'd
A
never
lot
want
of
to see that covered
challenges.
up.
I know.
Yeah, I mean, removing those, if you could remove the panels and put transoms back in there, that might be the accomplish the goal. But Bob,
Would that need to also go through an approval process?
would.
yeah,
Okay.
it would.
Okay,
But that would be so easy to get approved.
okay.
Are those, each window side, are those panes of glass? Or
Which-
they
which
individ-
portion?
On each side of the door?
They are, but they're gridded, so they're only 8-inch kind of squares, so there's really not room to put vinyls on those. If I could, I would have.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's just very, broken up, I guess.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Great. All right. I think that's what we got for you.
All
Thank
right,
you.
Thank you.
Okay, item next. I'm going to pass the baton to Ms. Pierce for this one.
At 137 Fourth Avenue North, and Laura Dispasquale and Elizabeth, this is yours. So if you want to go first, Elizabeth.
But the applicant will present first, and then
Okay.
I'll present
Okay.
mine. Yeah.
Good afternoon.
Hey.
How are you today? Good. So we're here again. We would like to replace these windows at 137 4th Avenue North. I have submitted more photos for you to see, and I think you all were here the last time, so you've heard me talk about just the lack of funds that we've had to deal with this in the past. And so we regrettably are here in this situation now, trying to remedy it in the best way that we can, and also in a way that uses the funds that we have. We're trying to be the good stewards of contributions that we have, and also the donation from Pella. This is Brittany Kaufman from Pella. So with all of that in mind, we're trying to ask to get these replaced.
Thank you.
All right,
Okay,
so
Elizabeth.
this application was deferred from the June Historic Zoning Commission meeting for the applicant to provide more detailed imagery and analysis of the existing window conditions to be supplemented for review. The applicant has provided additional photos numbered on each facade. The windows appear to be in a condition that is rehabable. A few windows appear to have the aluminum storm coverings on them still, so the condition of that from the exterior cannot be examined within the pictures. The guidelines do recommend preserving and rehabilitating historic windows, and staff would like the commission to discuss their analysis of the condition of the windows. One idea that was mentioned during the Historic Zoning Commission was replacing windows on less visible facades or spot replacing windows in conditions that are not repairable. So we would like feedback on that. Thank you.
Well, who would like to kick this off? Does Mr. Window want to? Brian?
I have gotten that moniker, haven't I?
Yeah.
I will say that the best practice for historic windows is to restore them, to repair and restore. And I think it's a very generous gesture of Pella to offer the windows to the church. But I don't think the generosity actually to go against our guidelines just for generosity, I don't see that as a good reason for that, when the old windows are repairable. And I would almost say that, you know, with the congregation at Fourth Avenue Church of Christ, and I know this is associated with that, I bet there might be some woodworkers actually in the church who could actually, might even be willing to take on a project like that, to actually look at the sashes, repair any rotten wood that was there, and restore those back. And that might be something you could explore, and that would actually help with the financial burden of that. But, you know, I got to looking at like an old house that I was at the other day, and I was thinking, you know, what it would cost to replace these windows if they were all taken out and replaced. And by friends who've gotten estimates before, I mean, I know it was $45,000 to $50,000. And I started adding up, if you were to repair each of those windows, and each one even cost $2,000, it would be half that cost. And I think probably even $2,000 is on the high side for that. So I think it's more economical to save them, and I think it's good historic preservation practice to save them. The Department of Interior recommends that. The state of Tennessee recommends that. Our guidelines recommend it. And I think you'll get a better look and a better product. And, you know, let someone else, you know, 75 years from now, reconsider that option of replacement, because I think they're repairable. Thank you.
Listening to what Brian said, I do agree with that. I am curious to the nature of, is it impacting like your heating bills, you know, that type of thing? I'm just curious about that.
Sure. The house is not used residentially. The Franklin Prayer House meets there. I don't know. I don't have anything. I don't know. I know what our heating bill is. I don't know that it's
I was just
exorbitant
curious from
or,
the
you know.
aspect of
Sure.
new windows versus original windows.
Yeah.
And I can speak on that too. Yes, for sure, it's a difference between single pane glass and double paned glass for electrical, or the heating and cooling. The big issue right now is there are sills that are rotting and water's able to get down into the wall, and it's causing more damage beyond the window. So just trying to find a solution as quickly as possible is key. We're able to order the windows, get them installed, cleaned up, and looking almost identical to what they do right now. From a distance, you're not even going to be able to tell they've been replaced. Obviously, if you have the eye for historic windows and you get up close and you look at them, you're going to say, okay, these have been replaced, but they already have had an aluminum facade added to the exterior, which is not original. And just the further damage that's being caused by leaving them open, kind of waiting to see what the answers are going to be. We're just trying to kind of get it done as quickly as possible before it causes more damage to the home internally.
Okay, thank you.
And may I make further comments on that? One, if it's a seal issue, the seals need to be repaired. So that has nothing to do with the sashes, but the seals. And they too can be repaired, either replaced or repaired. I know that window manufacturers made a lot of claims about energy efficiency and cost savings for electricity. At one time, a class action lawsuit was actually brought against the window manufacturers for making overclaims about that. My understanding is that for single pane windows, you have an R value of 1. And for most manufactured windows, you have about an R value of 2. I mean, that's not a lot of difference. Most people find, and I actually found this on my own historic home, is putting a good storm window on the exterior not only keeps our energy bills low, but it also acts as a sound barrier from outside noise. And we've been very pleased with that. We even have a UV coating on them to help with the UV light coming in the house. So there are other options for energy efficiency than just replacing your old windows.
I absolutely agree with that. I mean, there are other options. It just comes at a cost. And we're talking about a church, not someone that's living there and able to invest their money into it for, them to be comfortable living there. We're just trying to find a feasible way for the church to be able to fix. This house is in dire need of a lot of work. This is just the first step in a whole rehab project. The whole exterior of the house needs to be redone. So this is just our first step. And I attend the church there, and I just thought I could help out in a way. And so Pella offered to donate the windows. So this is my help to them to try to get them to spend the money elsewhere in the house, because this is not the only thing that needs to be done.
Well,
This
the
house has been
definitely-
neglected
the
for a while.
house has been neglected,
Yes.
that's for certain.
And we're just trying to do our best to fix it up now. And, now that Laura's on here and she approached me and said, hey, we got to do something with this house. We're just trying to start somewhere, basically. Trying to right the wrongs that have been done in the past and try to fix this house up the best we can.
I'll say, I'll start by saying that when it comes to windows, I do usually agree with my fellow commissioner. In this instance, what I see is a historic property that has been severely neglected over many, many years. I see an opportunity where there's not only momentum and interest in fixing it, but also financial support for a church, a nonprofit, obviously a place that is not going to have oodles of money for this or that repair. I understand what Mr. Lester is saying about window repair, and that, in the long run, maybe it's not even all that much more expensive than new windows, but the fact that Pella is willing to donate these windows, it's huge. And it's also huge in terms of the future of this building, because in a way, if we don't give the guidelines some room for, differences, or some room for extreme circumstances, if we don't do that, then we might actually be making the situation worse. For example, if you find out that restoring the windows is financially unfeasible, the building is going to suffer even more and more and more. I really felt that your suggestion regarding the front facade windows and focusing on those as a preservation of the historic windows opportunity was a great middle ground. We've done that before on historic homes. The front facade is what matters the most, because that is what people see from the street, and that is what is a priority. In this instance, I remember you saying that some of the front facade windows are not actually the historic
That's correct.
ones. Yeah. Now, I don't know if some of the historic windows on the sides could be retrofitted for the front. I guess that's a whole other analysis and conversation where we would have to look in quite a lot of detail at those front windows. But that, yeah, I just feel that there is kind of a golden opportunity here that we don't want to see go to waste. And with that, I'll let Mary speak.
And it's just it's just one window that has been replaced on the front. If you look at number 3, the big piece of glass at the lower half of number 3, that's what's been replaced. So from looking at other historic homes, it was probably a big window that slid up and down. Whoever had probably got broken, maybe, and they came in and just put a big picture window for cost purposes, because that would be a lot less expensive than doing a window that large that slid up and down. But that's just the only one there, and it's the only size in that window.
You don't, yeah, none of the others would match.
None of the
no.
others match that big.
That
And you
big.
honestly, it took us digging into it and looking and seeing, and it actually took us getting on a ladder and looking down and seeing that there was a weighted system for a window to slide up and down. And the fact that it was a big picture window was the only way we were able to figure out it had been replaced in the past.
What about 1 and 2, and then the ones in the
One's
dormer?
original, 2 is original, and then the top half of 3 is original. It's just the bottom half.
Oh, okay. And then the dormer?
The
Of 3.
dormer, we aren't replacing.
Oh,
The
okay.
dormer's staying for now.
And the top of 3 is original?
The top of 3 is
Okay.
original, it's just the lower half of
Okay.
3.
And your reason for the lower half, knowing its replacement is? so
It
that
had a weighted system
Okay.
left behind. We could
Gotcha.
see the pulley system.
Gotcha.
And the fact that it's a stationary window, that just
Gotcha.
didn't make sense.
My thought on it is, I could probably go for some window replacements on the rear and back sides. It's not, it's, what's the word? This is one piece of this house on its way to demolition by neglect. The aluminum siding is causing huge problems, and that's covering a lot more of the surface. So I feel like if you came back and say, you know, I have inspired other work on the building, and we're going to be removing the aluminum siding and doing repairs and trying to put the house back right. But right now, with the aluminum siding covering a lot of the window work, certainly the definition of the windows, I don't think it's going to show off your product very well. I could go for the back and the rear to try to take advantage of you being inspired to see something done to this building, and that we would be getting other repairs to the building. Because I know the church a number of years ago considered tearing it down, and I can only imagine what the appraised value of this is now. And it's worthy. So I'm not going to be for wholesale replacement of the windows. Maybe toward the back and rear, if there was a comprehensive plan to do something to bring this building to its former condition. I think it would be a knockout-looking structure. So I guess those are my words.
One other comment, just from a personal standpoint. My father-in-law is a Church of Christ minister. And I know a lot of Church of Christ members to be extremely generous people. And I know that we're talking about an expense here. And I'm just wondering if an appeal was made to the members of Fourth Avenue and tell them about this situation, I bet you'd have some very generous people come forward, you know, to make the repairs on this house.
It could be such a visual asset. I actually, the day that the historic church was torn down, I wrecked my car. I ran into the car in front of me. I was so astounded because I had just moved to town that I saw this, you know, wrecking ball hitting back and forth against the brick building. And the police actually decided to not give me a ticket or anything. They said they could understand why I was so taking my eye, you know, off the road for a second, and I just bumped the car. It wasn't bad, but I do think this house. I mean, you look at the stone foundation. This is a fine residence, former residence, and
Right.
adaptive reuse
Right.
now.
And
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely, I agree. We could get donations from everybody. This is just alleviating the cost of rehabbing the old windows, and then we could spend it to do the siding, or to do the gutters, or a roof. I mean, it needs everything on the exterior to be redone. So we could allocate that money to other places, basically. is
And
all
that
it
sounds like a
is.
comprehensive plan. I mean,
I think a
huge
comprehensive
comprehensive
plan is And I think both of you all are worthy leaders, so thank
you.
you. So we can get Josh to come back to the room.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, on to item number 3, discussions of alterations roofing at 106 Bridge Street. That's Brandon. He,
Hello, I'm Brandon Pretty with 906 Studio Architects. Pretty straightforward. The owner of this property is going to begin doing some work to it. This is just kind of the first small piece of that, wanting to replace the existing roof. As I understand it, he said it's about a 50-year-old shingle roof, so about ready for a replacement. He is looking to replace that with a metal roof. Obviously, color match that as closely as we can. And I've got a sample back there. They gave me a little larger sample than I expected of the profile for the metal roof. I'm happy to bring up here for you to look at, and then some other colors as well.
okay, all right, Emily, this one's you, I think.
It is. So the National Register lists this building as contributing to the downtown Franklin Historic District. And here's just a street view image of the building. The listing describes the building as a 1930 concrete block commercial building with a gable front roof of asphalt shingles and a stepped parapet with terracotta coping on the southeast facade. It has an original wood panel garage door with a row of light panels. Windows are 8-light metal casement. This building once housed the city sanitation offices, and it was also previously an auto repair shop. This property is also located in the floodway overlay. The design guidelines recommends preserving historic commercial roof forms and materials. Roofing sections on main and other visible facades should remain unaltered. So the guidelines would recommend that if there is change to the roofing material, the asphalt shingle would be the appropriate material. Thank you.
Great. Bob, you want to kick us off? How do you feel about metal versus asphalt shingles on this one?
I don't see any difference. That's my opinion.
Okay. Yes, sir.
So any idea what was there over 50 years ago?
I don't know. I am not sure.
I've looked at some aerial photographs.
Yep.
I mean, you know, from that distance, I can't tell what the roofing material was. All I know is when you go down, at least East Columbia, and there've been some buildings torn down on Columbia Avenue, kind of this age.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, most of those don't have metal roofs. They're more of an asphalt shingle type roof. I mean, asphalt shingles were being used quite a bit in the 1930s, you know, in commercial buildings. So that's the only thing that just kind of gives me pause on it from the metal standpoint is what I've seen on Columbia Avenue. Yep. that I don't know what they were originally, but asphalt was available.
Yep.
Asphalt might be the best reuse to go back with on this one too.
Mary?
Is there a reason to switch to the metal? Is there a pitch problem or anything like that?
No, I don't believe there's a pitch. It's really, I think he sees the metal as a more long-term kind of maintenance-free option. You know, metal panels aren't going to blow off when there's a heavy wind and you've got to get up there and repair a few of them. It's a heavier duty, longer term type of fix. And, you know, the hope was you get that color, you get a dark color that's, you know, visually going to match that as closely as possible, and you minimize that.
For the character of the building, I do think the shingles would trump the metal. I feel like it's it's a simple form. The front of it, has some charm to it. And I think the asphalt shingles contribute to that.
Okay.
Lisa?
I would agree, and I think the asphalt shingles are more consistent with what is in the neighboring area.
Okay. I think I would echo what was said, and my only, when you come around that curve, you think of that building as having a very small profile when you're standing in front of it, but you do get that angle when you come around, and I'm afraid that I can see your metal there. I guess it's that brown that's in the back.
Yes.
It's kind of blending with the paneling.
And that is not the color that's
That's not the
proposed.
color.
No, not the color.
So what's the color thought, black or
Yes.
gray?
Yeah,
Okay.
like a dark slate gray, black, something as closely as we can get. And I've got some samples I'm happy to show, but, color-wise, you would want it to not represent any difference from what's there.
Right, because that's my concern is coming around that corner.
Yeah.
You may see that long span,
Yeah.
and is it going to highlight the roof more than we would realize or want it to until it's in place?
That word you said, highlight, that I guess would be my concern. It's simple, and is your eye going to go there first? And is it going to look like a metal prefab building? Whereas right now, it has quite a bit of charm as being built years ago.
Yeah, and it's a long run. I mean, that's a long roof when you look at it from that angle. So, okay. Anybody else have anything else? All right. Thank you, Brandon. Okay, on to number 4, discussion of screening and roof-mounted mechanical equipment at 230 Franklin Road, the factory, Building 11. Victor, welcome.
Good afternoon. Thank you. So my name is Victor Lekov. I am the project architect on the Sapphire Restaurant, which is a tenant build-out in the factory at Franklin. As part of the permit process, we received comments from the city of Franklin that is requiring us to screen any mechanical equipment on the roof from that would be seen from the right-of-way. And so there was a lot of care on how we've laid out those mechanical units to minimize the sight lines. We've actually produced about 3 to 4 options trying to figure out what made sense. We had to work with the existing structure that was very weak and could not withstand a lot of additional load. And so we had to work with structural lines and obviously slight lines. And so if you go on page 3, this is sort of the best case scenario that we came up with, where you can see that most mechanical units are pushed to the east side, which reduces the sight lines, and we've pushed those units as low as we could on that roof. Having said that, we're still able to see them from the right-of-way, and so we're proposing a screening where that yellow line is on page 3 to hide those mechanical units. The screening will be raised about 4 feet above that brick parapet wall. The material that we'll be using will be a metal screen. It will be black, which is consistent with what was used next door on the Two Hands restaurant. So we're trying to be just consistent with what was done. So yeah.
Okay. Thank you. All right, Elizabeth, this one's you.
Thank you. So this application is proposing screening new mechanical units on the rooftop of Building 11 for the new tenant. The guidelines recommend fully screening mechanical equipment from public view, and the applicant has provided a rendering of the view from Franklin Road. Renderings of the view from Liberty Pike have not been provided, and a question to the applicant would be, is there any existing structures or anything screening the units from complete view from Liberty Pike? And additionally, I guess they answered the color and that the screening would match what's existing on the factory, which staff would support.
So the the way those mechanicals units are located is sort of in this nested area where it's hidden by the two ends building. I can't remember what number that is. And then you also have the water tower that is essentially hiding, that you can see on this site plan, actually, this little square on the bottom left. That's the water tower, which is sort of hiding your sight lines on those mechanical units. So you can't really see them except from Franklin Road or Franklin, Maine.
All right. Brian, you want to do this one?
Yes, I would. You know, one thing, and I've thought about this a lot at the factory, especially when we approved a screen off of Liberty Pike. I think that was for etch, for what they had.
Okay.
You know, if you look at the factory from many different angles, there's mechanical machinery everywhere on top. It's a factory. I mean, it seems to me that not screening all the mechanical equipment is fine, because it had a lot of mechanical equipment everywhere. I mean, this is not a clean look for historic property. It's a factory. And I would say I would support no screening at that. I mean, if the applicant insists on screening and staff is for it, I mean, I'd vote for that. But I think not having screening is perfectly all right for the factory.
So just to chime in there, so screening of mechanical units is a zoning ordinance requirement for changes.
Intersection between guidelines and the zoning ordinance.
Well,
Okay.
that's just my 2 cents.
Yeah, that's good. Okay, Mary, you want to go?
If staff is comfortable with this, I am. Thank you.
Lisa, how about you?
How hard would it be to see, because the applicant mentioned that there is a business next door that has a similar screening as the one that you're asking for?
Yeah.
Is that something difficult to pull up for us to see? Or maybe it's not possible? On, as they work on that, on the number 3 rendering, can you directionally point us, so that would be Franklin Road on the left?
That's
I mean,
right.
yeah,
Yeah.
and then.
On the left, yeah.
On the left, okay. And then we're talking about the front of the restaurant being where? I don't,
Right where she's pointing
This-
out.
that's
That
the
is
front of the
the front of
restaurant.
Building 11.
okay.
And so this, where you see the yellow line, which would be where the screening would be located, is sort of this step back
Step
facade.
back,
It's really nested. It's not the first thing that you would notice.
Okay,
Kind of back in a little courtyard right
Yeah,
there, right?
yeah,
I mean,
that's right.
that's where the little cottage was a long time ago, if I've got that right, I think, right there in that corner.
yeah, I'm having trouble picturing it, but are you proposing that the black metal casing or whatever that you would cover it with would be surrounding it completely?
So the
Or
screening
just
would
on-
be placed slightly behind the brick parapet wall, up 4
But-
feet.
But not on the other side, not parallel, like wall,
would-
not parallel screenings, right? The screening is just on one side? Uh-huh,
That's right.
Okay.
Yeah. It's a little hard to see that
Yeah.
there was a yellow line.
yeah.
which-
So the yellow line represents
The
the
screening.
screening.
That's right, yeah. And so this is what Two Hands, which is a restaurant next door, did, and it was
Thanks,
approved.
Kelly. Okay, so there is that's theirs, uh-huh.
And that screening on Liberty Pike, that's there already. It's
It's,
been
I
installed.
think so, yes, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so this portion that's on the screen now is what has been approved this past year for new screening on top of Building 13 on the second story. But there was existing screening further down along where the applicant has mentioned etch is going to be. That was existing there.
Well, given that, yeah, I wouldn't have any problem with that.
Bob?
No questions. I support it.
Yeah. Nothing further from me, so
Okay.
looks like you're on the right track.
Thank you, guys.
Great, thank you. All right, item number 5, which is discussion of new construction accessory structure at 206 Lewisburg Avenue. Mike Hendren. Mike, welcome.
Good evening.
Hey.
My name is Mike Hendren. My wife Kathy and I reside at 206 Lewisburg Avenue. And we are proposing or applying for what is essentially a carport with storage at the rear of the property. It would be approximately, actually 22 feet wide, 30 feet deep, the last 10 feet of depth being storage. We would anticipate the siding be something hardy plank or similar, painted in the same color as the primary residence with white trim mirroring that of the primary residence. Other than that, as you see in my application, I've given you some dimensions to talk about, so I'll be happy to address any questions you might have. Thank you.
Great, thanks. All right, Elizabeth, this one's you.
Thank you. So 206 Lewisburg Avenue features an existing principal building that is built circa 1900 and is a simple frame structure with a hipped roof. The proposed accessory structure is a carport with storage in the rear and takes on a simple form with a hipped roof that relates back to the principal building. The size and materials appear to meet the guidelines. The applicant has submitted the location of the proposed accessory structure being 2 feet from the property line, and zoning does require that accessory structures be 5 feet from the property line. The applicant is aware of this and may seek a variance for the location. And from staff's review, the placement, whether 2 feet or 5 feet from the property line, will not alter the overall form or relation to the principal building and the design guidelines. The windows appear to be double hung and be wood or wood composite, but specifications were not further provided, and staff would like feedback from the commission on the overall detailing as it relates back to the principal building, columns, brackets, and the French doors. Additionally, there are facades that are blank on the left elevation and rear elevation that staff would like the commission to discuss, as the guidelines recommend avoiding blank facades. And as it relates to the size of the structure, it is sized appropriately in relation to the principal building and the historic footprint.
Great, okay. Lisa, you want to, I keep trying to find ways to shake it up but in the order today.
I wish we had our architect here today, but I mean, from the first view of this, it appears, and from staff's comments, it appears appropriate. Could we see the rendering? I can't seem to pull it up on my iPad here. Yeah. What that third one? Yeah, what is that?
That is a current shed. It measures 12 feet by 12 feet. Of course, it houses most of our garden equipment. We would hope to be able to retain that and convert it to a playhouse for our granddaughters.
Oh, okay, so that won't be impacted
No.
in terms of
And I
this.
would point out the second photograph, the reason I've shown that's a gambrel roof on the property that abuts us to the rear. That roof is on a structure that's 3 feet from the property line. And needless to say, every time I turn into the driveway, that's somewhat of an eyesore. So I'm hopefully, from an aesthetic standpoint, this carport will be much more attractive than staring at that large gambrel roof on the rear property.
Certainly, and having some kind of window on the back of your accessory building doesn't make sense, right? Because it would be facing that?
No, what we'll have is a door, of course, facing the carport, and there'll be
Right.
one window facing the left side.
Okay, can you point to that one, Ken?
There will be nothing in the rear. The
Yeah,
property will be
yeah.
solid.
And you won't see it anyway because it butts against that other. Is that what you're saying?
There's no window at the rear of the property, which is the middle elevation there. The elevation to the left would be looking at it from the left side of the yard, and that's the only window that's available.
So the left elevation would face to the inside
To
of
the
the
inside of
property?
the property, right, and so the elevation facing to our neighbors will be solid.
So what are your thoughts about breaking up that mass on the part that's not facing the back part? Is that what you mean about your neighbors, is the back? Is that
No,
what you
I'm
mean?
talking about the neighbors to our right as we're
Oh,
standing on
okay.
Lewisburg Avenue. So
Okay.
that there'll be 10 feet of solid, and across the back will be, there'll be no windows there, and that will be 22 feet in width.
Okay, uh-huh. Yeah, I would agree with staff that breaking up that one massive wall, the one that is not facing the back, breaking it up with either a window or some other, way to break up that mass would be a good idea.
And the reason we didn't do that on the right elevation, I guess you would call it, is because our neighbors intend to put a fence up where it doesn't exist now. So that window would be looking out at a fence 5 feet away.
All right. Bob, you want to go next?
Well, talking about the driveway, will it be widened or will it stay in the same configuration?
It will likely be narrowed because the driveway runs to the property line. And so the carport's going to be offset from where the driveway is now. So it will be certainly narrowed at the rear of the property to feed the carport. I believe the setback there is 5 feet. We will seek a variance to get that to 2 feet. Our neighbors, Austin and Caroline Bass, are in agreement with that, but I know that is will require an exception to the zoning requirement. That way, we don't have to offset the carport 5 feet, only 2 feet perhaps. But we'll have to reconfigure the driveway to eliminate at least a couple of feet bordering our neighbor's property.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Brian?
Since they mentioned the architectural style, it looks kind of like you took cues from the house. And in what you did, you used elements you saw in the house to put on the garage. Is that
That's
that
correct. We debated the hip roof. The house is a hip roof, and if you look at the reason the house is historic, of course, it's in that district, but also the roof is quite unique. It's a hip roof, but it also flattens out the last 3 to 6 feet, which is a very unusual roof. This one will not, but we thought a hip roof should be consistent with the main property, and we liked the colors and thought that would look good as well.
I kind of thought from your drawings, it looked like you did have that little flare that flares out. Is that not the case on your roof?
I don't believe that's the case.
It doesn't have that little swoop down, I guess.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's all right. It's all right to have that variation. I don't see anything unusual about the architecture as far as it relates to the house. And I'm going to go back to the windows, and I know that we're trying to establish where they are, but so it's a carport. And when you
Correct.
drive into the carport,
Yes.
what you're seeing is a blank wall.
What you see is the 2 doors and 2 light fixtures on the wall. That would be the elevation of the right, in the middle, it's the one on the right there. That would be your look. as
So that's what
drive
you
in.
see when you drive in.
That's correct.
And then, so there are rooms or a room in there for storage or whatever. And then on the back side, it faces your rear neighbor, the neighbor you have to the rear,
Right.
and that entire wall is blank.
That's
There-
correct. That would be the middle elevation because quite frankly, to have windows there would only be looking at the back of that big brick building with the gambrel roof.
And I think historically, they wouldn't have put windows facing a neighbor like that with another building, so.
Yeah, thanks for clarifying.
Okay. I don't have any. Oh, did I not give you? Okay, I'm sorry. I was
That's
making Mary go
okay.
last.
That's okay. What is the height of this compared to the house?
The total height is 19 feet 4 inches. The elevation of the house from the ground is approximately 22 feet.
Okay.
The carport also sits approximately, because the lot slopes
Yeah.
towards the rear, the carport also sits about 4 feet below the floor of the house. So
Gotcha.
The house is taller, but when you add in the drop, it's actually about 7 feet taller.
I think it's a great project.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, now I'll go. Yeah, nothing for me. I think you're on the right track.
We've had some good help.
Yeah,
y'all
thank
very
you all
much.
so much. Okay, I'm going to step out one more time today. Okay, Madam Chair.
just like you see it, Kozebski. Yeah.
Which one do you want?
You all want to present your project.
Sure. So I'm Lise Boggs with MJM Architects. Mark Kozewski, also with MJM, as you've already met. And this is Tyler Eichen. He's with Slice House. He's one of our clients. With Slice House. Am I talking into it correctly? Okay. So this is regarding the First and Main project, which I think we saw most of you on site week before last. And we appreciate you guys coming out to discuss with us, and also your follow-up call with Steve regarding the TDOT easement that we need to watch for. So this submittal is primarily addressing those comments, and so I can either defer to you guys or just briefly touch on the individual points where we're making distinctions. So we did move forward with the dark horizontal screening on the rear facade, as was discussed to be the preference for this location. We've shifted back the wood pergola on the Perrin side, and we're keeping it simple, dark finishes as discussed. We're showing wall-mounted tenant signage for both tenants on the rear and also the front facade. As I understand it, both facades will be treated respectively.
We'll submit for that
Separately, yes. I just wanted to mention it, just hopping through the points. The replacement of the fence along the Riverwalk is pending our final survey to determine what is in floodplain versus what is in floodway. And then, of course, we've made a variety of other small changes, but we also wanted to discuss repainting at the filling station. And so Tyler has provided some documentation that we can visit whenever you're ready to discuss that point.
Okay, so for this application has a list of proposals to the site and the building, and for ease of understanding the proposal, I'll go slide by slide and to discuss each of the alterations. And we'd also like to thank the applicant for hosting the DRC for a site visit earlier this month. So, starting at slide 1, which I think is technically slide 2, but I'll say that this was the cover sheet. So for slide 1, there's a series of alterations. The first is the installation of a ramp. The ramp is to be positioned on the side of the building. The guidelines recommend positioning ramps on rear or side facades where not readily visible. The guidelines would support the positioning of this ramp. Then the second alteration is adding railing to the front of the building, and I'll zoom in to this photo so we can see a little bit closer. So there's railing proposed right here and then at this front area. So the installation of railing at these locations is not typical for commercial storefronts, and therefore the design guidelines would recommend avoiding adding architectural features if they did not exist historically. Then moving on to the slide 2, this slide discusses the lighting. So the existing lighting on the site consists of 2 non-historic sconce light fixtures on the building closest to the river. On the same building, there are 3 metal chandeliers hanging from the inside of the awning. The application includes the proposal to replace these fixtures with new fixtures that are simple in design. The guidelines recommend preserving, maintaining, repairing original details and ornamentation on historic commercial buildings. If replacement is required, design details and ornamentation elements to be compatible with the historic building and the district. The fixtures appear to be simple in form and appear to be compatible with the building. Moving to the next slide, here is another image of the ramp here on this side. Then moving on to slide 4. So for the screening behind the building closest to Harpeth Square, I'll zoom in for us. The screening will be updated to 7-foot white board and batten screening panels. The guidelines recommend placing ground-mounted mechanical equipment behind buildings and screen it from street view with landscaping, fencing, or walls. This proposal meets the design guidelines. For the existing walk-in cooler paneling and signage on this side closest to the Harpeth Square, the proposal includes repairing the existing board and batten siding and repainting it. This is appropriate within the guidelines. For the proposed signage on this unit, the zoning ordinance would allow for a wall sign on the rear of the building, but not on the refrigerator units. So we would recommend to having, if we can look at the screen and kind of look at where my mouse is, so that a wall sign could be kind of at this location, so it's actually on the rear wall, not on the refrigerator unit. The design guidelines further limit signs on the rear of the buildings limited to a directory sign, small hanging projecting sign, or a window sign. But, let's see, wall-mounted signs, let's see. The zoning ordinance would allow for a wall-mounted sign on the back of the building. It's just the design guidelines do not allow for that. So that is something that the commission could approve, but it couldn't be administratively approved by staff. For the wood pergola here in the middle of these buildings, constructing a wood pergola at the rear of the middle building is appropriate within the design guidelines. While the design guidelines do not directly address pergolas, they do recommend locating additions to the rear of the building so they are not visible from the street to ensure the visual prominence of the historic building. There are several proposals to install new windows and a couple of doors on the rear. The proposal is to install one window, a set of French doors, and 2 new doors at the rear of the building, and they are appropriate within the design guidelines. The design guidelines supports new openings on the rear of buildings. Moving to kind of closer down here to the river, the landscaping and walkway changes. The installation of a wood arbor close to the river is appropriate, as it will not be highly visible from street view. Moving the concrete path is minimal and will need to coordinate with B&S to determine about the floodway. So again, about the placing a sign on this refrigerator unit, we would recommend the sign to be on this rear part of the building, so it's actually on the building, not on the refrigerator unit. And for the rooftop screening, the screening on the roof will be dark in color and will screen the rooftop elements, which meets the zoning ordinance and the design guidelines. Additionally, the screening maintains the difference between the different portions of the building to honor the story of the construction of the buildings over time. So the next slide is to go in, it shows in depth kind of where the proposed doors will be located. So there's one that's closest to the river over here. This door is being replaced with a wider service door. This window is being added. The French doors are being added. Then moving on to the next slide about the dumpster enclosure. The dumpster is proposed to be widened in the same location to include the dumpster and the cardboard recycling bin. While we've talked about the location of the dumpster, this application includes specification for the enclosure, so we haven't seen this before now. The zoning ordinance requires walls on refuse areas to be provided to be fully screened from public view and no less than 6 feet in height. The walls shall be opaque and constructed of brick or stone materials that complement the main colors and materials of the associated building they serve. Gates shall be opaque and designed to complement the wall materials. To allow dumpster gates to remain closed as often as possible, either a pedestrian door, a wall offset for pedestrian access, or self-closing gates shall be provided. As proposed, the design of the dumpster enclosure must be redesigned to incorporate stone or brick for the walls of the structure, and the proposed front board and batten doors can be utilized as shown in the proposal. Moving to slides 7 and 8, these are porcelain enamel steel walls. The exterior walls of the building on the left, closest to the Harpeth Square, utilizes the porcelain enamel steel walls. In the National Park Service preservation briefs, the preservation and reuse of historic gas stations recommends the following for enameled panels. Porcelain enamel offers a good example of some problems and the level of skill and expertise that may be required when repairing historic materials. Spot repairs of damage, such as drill holes, impact damage, to those of manufactured panels are challenging. Because of the original glass-like finish was baked on at a high temperature, it is hard to adhere filler and paint the enamel surface. Blending new material with the original surface color is particularly difficult. The preferred, least intrusive approach is to remove any rust, fill any depressions with marine epoxy filler, prime, and repaint the surface with a high-quality glossy enamel. This paint coating will likely require a renewed treatment after some years. The preservation brief also says that the color of these buildings historically worked to brand the structure and signal to passing motorists a desirable place to stop. The gas station form on this site was rediscovered during a major renovation in the late 2000s, and a COA was approved to restore the gas station as much known using historic images. While the original colorway isn't known, the colorway of the white and a brand color was commonly used. There were many color recommendations throughout the guidelines for materials, so color and material often reviewed by the Historic Zoning Commission. It's not reviewed for paint colors on siding for residential buildings. Staff applauds the applicant for being great stewards of the building and breathing fresh air into this important gateway into downtown Franklin.
See, so the ramp and railing, I'd like to start with that. I think not only appropriate, even though I know it's based on what Emily was saying, it's not a common feature. It's clear to me that there could be a safety reason for putting it there. We also know that railings can be removed. They're not going to impact the historic building, I don't think, in any damaging kind of way. The what Emily covered about the signage on the back, I had a question, Emily. So you had pointed to the two places where signage could be attached to the actual building rather than the coolers. So could they have two signs back there?
They could have two signs.
Uh-huh.
And that was determined by the zoning administrator, that they could have those two
Okay,
signs.
yeah. Yeah, I think that would definitely work really well. The pergola actually works to break up that massive side, which is very attractive and also doesn't impact the building itself in a damaging kind of way. I guess I'm a little surprised, Emily, about what you said about the new openings. I mean, we're talking about, I guess you wouldn't call this a contributing building per se, but, so the guidelines do say that openings on the back are acceptable, new openings?
New openings, because they are on the rear. It offers a little bit more flexibility because they are on the rear instead of like on the front facades and even on the rear facades.
Is that mostly for businesses, just
For
commercial?
commercial.
Okay.
Yes,
All
ma'am.
right, understood. And the porcelain enamel, Emily, thank you for your research on that. That was interesting. Did you have plans to change that blue feature, or were you going to stay true to that as much as possible? And I know we don't have a say over what color you're choosing, but in this case, based on what Emily was saying, staying true to that actually is a reflection of of the history of the building. Were you going to remain with the blue?
We haven't figured out the colors of that yet. I'm just going down the path of doing the research of repairing and repainting that area.
Yeah.
When I talked with the current owner of the building, when he received the building when it was the boat locker, and I think there's images there. He did his demo work to start removing the wood panels that were covering the service station side. And when he uncovered it, that's when he found the enamel painted metal siding. And it was in pretty bad shape at that time. He told me that he removed all those panels, bonded and repaired all of that work, sent it to Nashville and had it powder coated. And then it came back and then re-adhered it. So that happened before 2011, that he did all of that work. It was my understanding that if this building had been painted, then I could repaint it. So my number one concern is to repair it. It's in pretty bad shape. There's a ton of holes and there's a lot of damage there.
Yeah.
So my goal was to repair it, and I know when I repaired it, it was gonna make it look even worse. So when I repaired it, I wanted to be able to paint it as well.
Yeah,
So I just haven't gone down the path of what color we would paint it.
Sure,
yet.
and we, is that correct, Emily? We don't technically have a say over the color, correct? Or is this a unique situation?
This is a unique situation that it is historically, that there has been, within like the research from this National Park Service bulletin that I researched, it is typical to have majority of the building be white, and then kind of how it is now, like the canopy and the accent colors it would correspond with the certain gas company. So like Sinclair would have been a green color.
Understood, okay. Yeah, that's helpful. Yeah, so my recommendation would be to stay true to the history of the building by keeping that.
Yeah, we
if
just don't know what
possible.
color that blue was.
Sure.
And I know he added that canopy as well.
Yeah.
He extended the canopy. It would used to be a short walkway on the side of the building on First Street, and he extended it and made it larger. We just don't know what the original color of that building was.
I like that you've incorporated remarks from our site visit, like the screening being darker. Getting to the back, I know the designers have said, have the signage on the walls. Did y'all originally want your signage to be lower?
We were trying to keep it at the pedestrian level so that it's obvious to customers coming in from the rear parking lot which way they should go, since they're really all having to come around the building to get into the front entrance.
Okay.
But I think having it on the building would still be helpful.
And I wanted to ask Emily, could they have signage that's more lower than just on the top of the building?
So they could. There are a couple of options for the rear. The design guidelines do offer that for the rear of buildings that lead out to a parking lot, there are a couple options. So it's limited to a directory sign, a small hanging projecting sign, let's see, and window signage. So those are the options. So the design guidelines don't technically offer up a wall sign as an option, but the zoning ordinance does allow for that option.
Okay. Thank you.
Could we, just to make sure that I'm clear, so not having it on the two, currently proposed is on the two walk-in refrigerators. I know that the guidelines doesn't necessarily speak specifically to that. Could we come to this group to have that approved, or?
You could,
Okay.
yes.
Okay.
Yeah, it just, it couldn't be administratively approved, but if you wanted to have like a directory sign on the back, that is something that could potentially be approved by staff.
Okay. Thank you.
But was your question more a zoning question on that, as to whether or not zoning allowed a sign on a cooler or not, or?
No, it sounded like zoning allows it. It sounded, was that no?
Zoning allows a wall sign,
Is that,
but
that's
it would
not
have to be,
considered-
it would have to be on the building, and those are on the coolers.
Okay, so the cooler's not considered a wall.
We're, the Historic Zoning Commissions are not the ones saying don't have it on the cooler. It's in the zoning ordinance.
So we'd have to go through zoning to get it on the cooler?
So you could come before historic zoning and get it approved for on the wall,
Okay. On the wall of the cooler.
on the wall of the building.
Okay.
I'm not sure if you would want to proceed with going to the Board of Zoning Appeals for it to be on the wall of the cooler, but it really doesn't meet zoning ordinance for it to be on the wall of the cooler.
And it doesn't matter whether the wall of the cooler is wrapped in another material, not necessarily the cooler itself.
Correct.
It does not, okay, that doesn't affect it.
Because it would just still be considered a walk-in cooler. It wouldn't be the main building.
So to the paint colors. And I thought Emily did a fantastic job on the whole presentation of this and the suggestions, and I have no issues with anything that was brought up. And I think it's a great example from the Department of the Interior, what to do with enameled panels. But on this corner, traditionally, it was Gibbons Gulf. So it had been a Gulf station. And when I think of Gulf stations from my age, from the times what I remember these orange and white signs that say Gulf, or blue, orange, and white. But historically, on the buildings built during this period, which have been the 1950s, you have white and blue. And that's what you're seeing on this building. So if you're looking for a blue, and the color blue, if you think it's been powder coated something else and you make repairs, I would recommend finding the Pantone color that is associated with historically with Gulf blue and going back with that color for the blue trim. But I think if you're actually looking for a color, you could find the Pantone that would match that. And now we have something that's historically accurate in the color. I think it would be very appealing to the public. I think it's a beautiful building to go into in these colors with white and blue. And I'm glad you're looking for a solution, and I appreciate that.
Thank you. I would say that I can promise that the whatever we want to call it, the gas station, is a contributing property. I don't know how old that update of that section is, but it would definitely be contributing. And Mike Wolf has just done a station over in Columbia that's kind of the talk of the region. And I think if this is played up, same thing, it would, I feel like you have been very responsive to the feedback from the commission. So everything that's been pointed out, I would agree with. I did want to ask the staff, you said that the enclosure for the dumpster has to be stone or brick. What's considered stone?
I would assume like a limestone or a natural material.
And in this situation, not a concrete block.
There's no stone or brick on the building.
No, that's what I was wondering because of the vibe of this era building.
We can look at the design guidelines to see if there's anything that might support an alternative material.
Yeah, neither
Let us
one of
look at that.
those seemed to me to have the vibe of the building. I think maybe metal panels would be an option. Concrete block would be an option to me. That would be something I would love them to look at. But, oh my gosh, what you all are doing is going to be amazing. And, the other thing I wanted to ask, this is so big. Is an option at the rear some kind of a hanging placard? Or I think it would have to have kind of a mid-century vibe to it, or some kind of monument thing or something, because that back is just different how it is. So
You mean like a small hanging projecting sign?
Yes, ma'am.
That would be
Okay.
appropriate and
I
is-
think it could underpin the design of the building if it were done right.
it would have to be on the building. It couldn't be
Oh, it couldn't
on-
be freestanding. No.
No, and it couldn't be on the refrigerator units either. It'd have
And
to
it
be on the
couldn't,
building.
it couldn't be a monument sign that's all metal
The
and
mon-
enameled looking.
Monument signs are not.
None of them.
in-
Okay, no situation. Okay.
Could something be on the fence or no?
Okay.
Located on the fence?
Yeah, no signage on the fence either.
No.
We'll make it work. Figure it out.
This might, well, I don't think it's appropriate for me to say it. I won't say it. I'll ask staff first.
The challenge that we're having is like, we think the majority of our customers are gonna be entering through the rear. They're parking in that back parking lot.
I agree.
And they're coming back, so we wanna have, we understand the signage in the front and
Yeah.
we'll comply and we'll make that appropriate. We're trying to add it to the back because that's where the majority of our, we believe our clients are gonna be coming from.
And maybe there is a way to hang something from the back of the building, but
So what about directional signs?
I
Would they be
know.
allowed any kind of directional signs that would direct people to certain areas of the building?
You know, we do offer convenience signs as a optional, you know, type of sign, but it is for kind of like entrance and exits for inside of the, like, kind of at the sidewalk area directing you into the site, but it's kind of for vehicular kind of directional signage. But we could look into a convenience sign, you know, different type for another kind of signage, kind of directing people in. Just let us look into that as an option for you all.
it's a unique situation. Okay, do you all have any other questions or?
I think that was it.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Look, you need to look at the station in Columbia that's
I
being.
live in Columbia, so
You
I'll
know,
put some
yeah.
pictures, yeah.
It's looking good, isn't
It
it?
does, yeah, it looks great.
Thank you again.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Mary.
You're welcome.
Okay. All right. Item next, a discussion of an addition principal building at 231 Miles Manor Court, Jasmine Grove. Amanda. Oh, yeah, there's another one. Yeah, it's coming.
Hey guys, it's Amanda McCreary, Chisel Workshop. If you all recall, we took a site visit. We looked at the garage, which we talked about earlier last week, but we also looked at the addition on the back of the house. So I've been before DRC once, and then we took our field trip, and so we're back again because we're getting that part of the puzzle kind of full steam ahead. So still looking to go off the back to the rear and also to the right. The footprint hasn't changed from the last time that we discussed as far as location goes. We really feel that with this site, that is the best location for the addition. The current house already sits out on that side anyway. We are proposing that 1980s addition, reworking all the windows that are on that. If you recall, they're very large. So doing some things to clean up the architecture that's on that portion, as well as bumping out the back. And then a couple of changes from the last time. One of the big things we talked about was that chimney, because it had to be so tall. We actually ended up pushing it out a little bit more, so that way we're more than 10 feet away from the next structure. So from a code standpoint, we can meet code and get that chimney kind of better in scale with the rest of the house. We have some sketch elevations too in the submittal, because before they were just very blocky. And a couple of things with the elevations that we are looking at is this particular style of house is very symmetrical. And so with that addition off the back, we kind of reworked the floor plan on the first level to get that door really centered on that gable end addition and get that architecture a little bit more keeping with the topography of the house. The typology of the house, really. We also have on the right side is the existing kitchen. Not that, on the right side of that rear elevation. You can go back to the rear. Yes, so the top windows are the ones that were reused from a cabin somewhere, but they're still old and historic. We're keeping those. The one below that is a new Marvin window. It was put on in the 80s, and we're kind of looking at redoing some of the window work there too, because it's a really massive elevation. Without the windows, it feels a little top heavy of how it is. And then the addition on the left, really looking, last time we talked about a screen porch, but looking to have it enclosed with windows. You can go to the next elevation, you can see that as well. So we've kind of centered up the architecture, gotten that chimney lower in scale, and really brought it out. This particular style of house, I know that the guidelines prefer additions to be to the rear. We do have a historic well to the rear, so we can only go back so far before we start encroaching on that. So we do not want to continue to push ourselves back because of that. This particular site has a ton of room to the right. It's really private to the right too, because we've got some historic trees. But also, I know with the guidelines, I've worked in downtown Franklin enough to know that the majority of my sites are tight, narrow, and longer. So yes, we do our additions to the rear. This particular site is much different. It's got a lot of land to work with. And this particular style of house, it's not unusual to see that kind of conservatory, sunroom, keeping room to the side of a house. And at the end of our submittal here, we do have some pictures of some homes in Franklin that have similar conditions. There's a beautiful one. I mean, my dream house is on Fair Street. I would love to have that house. So if you're listening, yeah, that house is
I think it
beautiful.
has a cobblestone driveway.
Yes, it's gorgeous. But you can see with this, there are homes in Franklin that do have these kind of sunrooms off to the side. And our house is of that stature. It is of that historic, heaviness that can handle an addition to the side. So that's where we're at.
Great. Elizabeth.
Thank you. So we're looking at the historic Jasmine Grove and the principal building this time. So this application proposed an addition on the rear of the home that will extend to the side and be visible from the street and potentially from the rear from Harlansdale as well. The home is set back from the street a fair amount. The guidelines recommend that if a rear addition is not feasible, a side addition may be considered when properly designed to complement the principal building. It is recommended that the side addition to be no more than 1/3 of the width of the front facade. From the calculations provided, and please correct me if I'm wrong, the principal building is 50 feet in width, and the proposed addition would extend 27 feet to the side.
I will have to check that. The living room portion of the house already extends to the side. So the only part that we're adding that's extending to the side is the sunroom portion.
Okay, thank you. So if this is correct, then it exceeds the side addition recommendations. And staff, the applicant has clarified that there are existing structures and historic aspects of the property to the rear that kind of limit them from further extending to the rear. Otherwise, the addition meets the recommendations for size and appears subordinate to the historic home. The form of the addition is easily distinguishable through the proposed roof forms. However, they are somewhat more complex than and the guidelines recommend to utilize a similar complexity as the existing roof. And the windows that are proposed appear to be a little more ornate than what is seen currently on the house, with some transoms and arch detailing. And the guidelines recommend utilizing windows that are compatible with what is seen existing. Additionally, a front elevation of the home was, and with the proposed addition, was not provided, so staff can't comment on how visible that will be from the front. Inspiration images of similar sunrooms have been provided that are seen in town. Additional alterations are proposed to the rear non-historic section of the home from 1987 to alter the rear porch and window configuration on the first floor. The window spacing that is seen on the house varies throughout different additions over time, and the new configuration relates more to what is seen on more recent additions. with more windows. Staff would like more feedback from the commission on the overall form, impact on the public view shed from the rear and front side addition width and detailing.
Great. Brian, I heard a lot about windows. You want to go?
Well, I will say I agree with staff, especially on the ornateness on the rear of the building, of the windows. I think those could be tweaked some to be a little more in, historic keeping and still provide a lot of light,
Right.
for the occupant. Overall, I think going out to the side is appropriate. Even Carnton had a kitchen addition at one time. A tornado took it down.
We had one off to the side on this one as well. It's in the historic photos. I think it's very common for.
And the old Manny place that's set here, even one of the Civil War generals used it for quarters at one time. The addition that they tore down that came out the back, I mean, Abram Murray, who founded Franklin, he had a home called Tree Lawn that looked very much like that, and it's been demolished as well. But that original, I think, probably went back to the early 1800s, 1800 to 1810. I mean, that was an early one. Too bad there wasn't a historic zoning commission.
Right. You can see like a tiny, tiny little piece of the foundation out in the yard.
I think it may have been what was originally on that site. But it looks almost like that you've kind of given a little homage to that. Is that what I'm kind of seeing coming out from that perpendicular? Is it go perpendicular into what's coming?
Yes.
So what's coming out of the house at the gable's perpendicular, and then that is actually.
Yes, it's very similar in form to what was historically there.
Yeah, I think that's a nice touch to that. I think the only thing I would support staff on is working on how the windows are placed.
Absolutely. And it's a little bit, and I need to go through some total scope with my clients. I'm going to get ahead of myself a little bit of it. So the windows on the front are not historically what was there. They were double doors with transoms. A long time ago, they actually tried to purchase them because they knew where they were, and they were not able to do so. So we've had some discussions of do we put those back or not? And that might play into it to some degree, because I would agree with what's there currently. This is more heavier on the ornate side. What was there historically, it's keeping a little bit more in that, and that's one path we're just unsure of yet, but that's why I'm here at DRC, so we can have these discussions. But that is something to consider, because I think if we go one way or the other, it might inform a little bit of what happens in the back.
And just as what's happened to the house over the years, too, you're right, there've been a lot of changes with that. But at one time, it was like Franklin's Country Club.
It was a country club in the 20s. Yep.
Great. Bob?
I wish I had been on the site visit to see
It
this.
was fun. The garage didn't fall down while we were there, so that was good.
That's good. The house, I mean, you can tell from the house, it's had its natural progression from
Right.
the 1850s.
Right.
With all the additions. So I see the right sun porch just being a natural evolution of that addition to the house.
Thank you.
Mary?
The only thing I was going to say anything about was the windows on the rear, and the one that particularly bothers me is the palladium. So
Okay.
other than that, I think it's wonderful. I think it's a big favor to this house.
Yes, and one thing I didn't mention, because this was discussed in our last meeting, is I think some of the commissioners wanted to see the floor plan of the existing home, and we did add that. But part of the reason of this addition is we're trying to keep the four square, that's the historic home, the four square. I mean, it would make a whole lot more sense to put that primary bathroom closer to the bedroom and in the inside of the house, but we're trying to preserve that. So we're trying to keep, the more modern features to the rear of the house.
Lisa?
Which window, Mary, were you referring to in particular? Oh,
The second
yeah,
floor.
agreed. Yes, I concur with everything that's been said.
And I would say windows, just to give more direction on that, on the L kind of off of that comes out, where you have almost like French doors and then immediately windows abutting those French doors. I think if there was more separation.
Give them some space.
Give them some space, you would pull off a little bit of that earlier period look.
And I know you'll have it as it evolves, but obviously that front view and when you're turning the corner
Yes.
there, because that's
Yes.
really kind of at an angle.
Yes.
I think is going to be helpful for us to see. And then what about those historic trees?
Yeah,
are
we're
they
staying
okay?
away from the magnolia.
Okay.
Yeah, part
Okay.
of the reason that sunroom is to the back portion as opposed to the front portion is that we're keeping off the root ball of the historic magnolia. The other tree that's back there, they planted, it was like their old Christmas tree.
Okay.
So that's not a historic tree, but we are staying off. That's why that sunroom's kind of on the back addition as opposed to closer to the house.
Right. And I know we're not supposed to look at landscaping as
Right.
we evaluate all this, but the view shed is not just the front here because we
Yes.
have Harlansdale Farm,
Yes.
which is a public view. And so, that was just curiosity for me. That tree line that we see in the photos is not going to go away. It sounds
Yeah,
like.
that was something very important to the owners. There's a couple of old Christmas trees that they've planted over the years, or someone, I think that actually the previous owners planted it. They had told us the story about it. We're gonna get rid of those. They look a little scrubby, and honestly, they're too close to the foundation. I said it'll be very interesting when we take that out of what that foundation actually looks like, because it's right up on it. And that's on that 1980s edition. But the historic tree line towards the front will stay. And they lost a lot of boxwoods when the big giant ice storm, which was unfortunate. But we're kind of looking at it. I know you don't review landscape, but we're
Right.
looking at it very holistically, and we're going to do some appropriate landscaping along the side and towards the rear.
Yeah.
So it looks good from all directions.
Good.
But so we're going to get rid of the scrubby trees, keep the historic ones, and have a period appropriate.
Right. Well, I think
landscaping.
this is another example of where a site visit can be so helpful
Yes,
in giving
yes.
context.
Yes,
So,
it is. That side of the house is, when you see it in person, it's not exactly lovely.
looks a little different than the front,
It
right?
does,
So,
it does.
Good. Okay. Yes,
Say
ma'am.
one more thing. When we're talking about the back, now I'm looking at it more. If there's a way, Amanda, to make the back entrance feel more like a back entrance, because to the point that you do see this from so many directions.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Thanks,
Thank
guys.
you. Appreciate it. All right, we're on to number 8, discussion of new construction principal building at 242 Miles Manor Court, lot number 1. Mark Spivey, welcome.
Hi, my name's Ross, actually.
Okay.
Once flight got canceled.
Uh-oh, so you get the joy of being with us. All right.
This is a new lot. It's been there a while. The house to the right owned this lot before. They just sold that house to the right and broke up the lot right next door. So we bought that lot, and Mark is wanting to build his personal house on that lot. There's a couple questions I had about the courtyard. Oh, sorry.
Make sure it's green.
There we go. There's another courtyard on the other side, I think it's lot 5 or 6, that comes close to that setback on the right, which I think right now is like a 15-foot setback. That courtyard on the other side that we'd want to mirror is a lot closer setback to the street than that, so we'd like to keep that same feel of the courtyard in that as well. And just kind of wanted to get opinion on, we have stone, if we could do brick instead of stone, painted brick. There's a new house that was just built directly behind here that is similar to that look. But that is what we proposed in that lot, and thinks it would fit good in that area, so.
Okay. All right, Elizabeth, this one is all you.
Thank you. So a new principal building is proposed on the corner lot on the curve of Winslow Road and Miles Manor Court. This will be highly visible on 3 facades, as the rear has an alley access. The left elevation will front Winslow Road, and the front elevation will front Miles Manor Court, and be across from the historic Jasmine Grove. The proposed home is inspired from the Tudor style. We would like the Commission's feedback of this proposal, as there are guidelines within each category that the proposal does not meet. I will not go through each one, but staff will provide the list of items to the applicant if they would like, and I'm more than happy to answer any questions regarding guideline questions from the commissioners. We can discuss the placement, building form, size, height, roofs, porches, foundation, materials, details, and ornamentation, entrances, windows, dormers, gutters, and awnings. New infill buildings should be compatible with nearby historic buildings while conveying the stylistic trends of today. New buildings should be designed to reinforce the basic visual characteristics of the district. A block face comparison of the proposed home and the existing homes is required for consideration, but was not provided at this time. Since this is a corner lot, there are 2 block faces, Winslow Road and Miles Manor Court, that will be considered for this new construction and relating it back to its established block within the Franklin Road Historic District. There are also 5 project considerations from zoning that we will provide to the applicant for logistics of applying for a building permit as well as integration into the block. So more than happy to answer any questions.
Okay. Lisa, do you want to go first on this one?
Well, the reason I'm chuckling is because it's a lot, you know, and you know, you were just talking about site visits. I'm having trouble picturing this in the location, you know, or even in the context of what Elizabeth was saying regarding the other houses that will be around it, you know. The context is a big deal. And when we look at these pictures, it doesn't tell the whole story, which is why it's so helpful to have pictures of what is going to be around it in terms of how it fits in.
Right.
And both in architecture and mass and scale, those kinds of things. Now, in terms of height, Elizabeth, you said that the height, or you didn't say the height. Is it consistent with?
So the height was not provided within the submittal package, but it should be within 10% of the average height of the historic buildings on the same block face, and must not exceed the zoning ordinance requirements, and to design new height on new streets to be compatible with the historic residential building heights on the nearest block face, and to measure from the height of the grade to the finished floor. Yeah.
So we don't know that.
Yeah.
Right. And
So with the houses that are around, obviously some are very old. There's one right behind that is brand new. So it's kind of a difference of which one we're picking, wanting to look like the new one that's right behind, rather than the ones that are there before, with keeping the same thing as the courtyard on the other side to match that. It's, you know, like a curved street that goes all the way around. So we're kind of wanting to do something that matched that.
sure.
Well,
I mean, I understand why you would want to do that.
right.
But because it's in the historic district, it has to be more broadly contextual.
Right.
Not just the one that you're favoring, because it helps your design. And
So I guess
your
that would be my
idea.
question too, is how did something like that, that's super modern, get passed in that area when it's, I mean, they're all right there together, you know?
Yeah, and I'll just jump in. I mean, the guidelines and the rules
Right.
evolve over time. And so those homes that are on Miles Manor that are existing, you know, we'd have to go back and look and see what was applicable at the time that those were approved. I mean, that's, so we have to look at what we've got in place today. And-
Right.
And those have been revised since I've been on this commission. So it's an evolving, just like you heard earlier, probably, folks asking questions about things where the zoning ordinance may have changed over time as well. So that's part of, but I understand that. Sorry, Lisa, I didn't mean to
No.
jump in.
No, that was, I'm glad you did. And that covers my comments, except to say that I feel like we don't have enough information here. And so, next.
So the height shown on here, that you're asking, is 36 feet 3 inches.
Is that from the lowest point of grade to the ridge?
Correct.
Okay, all right, Mary.
I agree. We don't have enough information. We're going to have some kind of a streetscape, however simple, to show the height of it related to the ones it's beside and the ones to the rear.
Okay.
And having a new house that has some modern features to it, I mean, that isn't the problem.
Right.
I think it's the massing, the scale, how the courtyard works. I can't really tell from this how it works. We're going to have to understand
Right.
that. We're going to have to understand the materials. We'll be looking at the form. When I just look straight on at this house, I kind of go, there's nothing, when you look at the front door, it looks like it just all of a sudden died.
Mhm.
That it was a very busy house, that all of a sudden, but I'm not probably seeing the whole thing.
Yeah, everything kind of runs, long, skinny lots.
So
and
we're
that.
going to have to see it, not only a footprint compared to the other houses, but the height, some indication of the material.
Okay.
That's what this meeting's for,
Yeah.
is an entry point. So we
For sure.
appreciate you coming. And I would say you want to come back to another design review meeting
Yeah.
with more. We could make a site visit. It's honestly a very easy site to drive by on your own
Mhm.
because it faces two streets.
Right.
So that's up to other people what they want to do. But I think come back with just a lot more information so we
Mhm.
can really understand.
Brian?
So there are a lot of moving parts. And the first thing I want to say is, I actually think that this is it's a fantastic design. I mean, I like the design. I think this design would go great in a modern subdivision. And I think, somebody would really enjoy this house and the way it's laid out. It's very impressive from that standpoint. But when we're considering the historic zoning overlay in a neighborhood, and I think it's not only just the historic guidelines, it's the transitional features that zoning requires that will apply to what happens on this corner. So not only when you refer to the Anderson house, I mean, it's on a street and it kind of runs back on the lot. It only has the first street you see. You see it from the road.
Mhm.
What's being proposed, you will see from the corner.
Right.
And, from the neighborhood perspective, if you look at the little pods that are all around, the
Mhm.
little cottages, and then what was built on Miles Manor Drive across from Jasmine Grove, those are kind of the style of pre-1850. I mean, this is completely in juxtaposition to everything in that neighborhood.
Mhm.
And I think that is where the pushback on the style is coming from, not from the overall design. Like I said, I think it's really
Right.
good. You've done a great job. But for that corner, it doesn't work.
Right.
And I think that's the feedback. And I don't want you to think if you go back and just do a lot more, give us more views of this same thing, I think that's the wrong direction. The wrong direction is to rethink it, rethink about how what you do on that corner fits in that neighborhood.
So what part would you rethink? Like the exterior finishes, or are you talking about the entire house or the layout, or?
So we do nothing with layout. So it would have to do with the style. So I consider this kind of more of a Dutch style with some Tudor influences. I mean, I don't know that you're seeing that in that neighborhood, and especially on that corner where you're going to get almost a federal 1850 style houses all in the row right next to you.
Mhm.
So I think it's going to take just a rethink on that and looking around that neighborhood and thinking about what brings that all together on that corner.
Okay.
One thing I would say, Mr. Chair, corners matter more.
Mhm.
And it's still going to matter to me to see those other houses so you can see the context.
Mhm.
That's going to matter to me. I'm not going to have a huge issue with that there are Tudor houses in the neighborhood, but there's nothing with that many windows, anything like that, and corners matter more
Right.
in historic preservation. And I think if you looked at the house that you were being inspired by, you don't see anything close to this. So,
Well, I think the really term is overwhelming.
It's
So if
yes,
you're
that's
coming
the
on that
word.
corner, I mean, it takes up that entire view.
From the whole street.
Okay, Bob?
I agree with my fellow commissioners. Driving around here multiple times, just after we got our packet, just what we see that's been supplied is so off course of what is on that one block. Maybe if it was on a different street in the neighborhood, it might look completely, a little more sympathetic.
A little more, maybe.
But with what I've seen, I don't know anything about the scaling or anything like that. I'm just specifically looking at aesthetics. And I think it's a great house. I just don't think with that design, it's the right fit.
Okay.
So I'll go next. I think to Commissioner Pierce's comment about corners really mattering in historic zoning in particular, what I would say is this lot is a great opportunity. It's also riddled with challenges because of the grade and just because it is so long and skinny.
Right.
And so when you look at the house that the Andersons have there, that took there was a lot of back and forth in this, before this commission on that. And that sits, it doesn't have the visibility this does. And so when I look at you look at the front elevation, I hadn't thought about the door, kind of like the house looking like it dropped off, but the front elevation looks pretty demure. You look at that side, and it's going to be what you're going to see before you ever get to the front elevation, and you're not going to be able to remember the front elevation because it is so long, tall, massive. That bump out coming out in the alley just does not look in keeping to me with kind of the massing and the scale of what we'd see. So I do think I would say, have you all been able to sit down with staff and kind of work through, because I know they're willing to meet with applicants and they encourage it.
They told us to come to this first, just to submit everything and then come here to discuss, so.
We had offered, setting up a meeting with us prior, but we're willing to meet with you before you attend the next design review committee, so we
Okay.
can provide these comments and help you kind of get your design, headed in the right direction before you attend the next
Okay.
meeting.
Yeah, there are a lot of moving parts because you were asking questions about side setbacks and mirroring something else. Like that gets into zoning code requirements, and then there are all these averages of the block face, and the good and the bad is you've got two block faces, and you've got a block face without really historic homes on it, and then you've got a block face with a lot of historic homes on it, and averaging all that out, they are an awesome resource, and they're here to help. So I would say, I would spend some time taking the feedback from tonight. You're getting the big picture. And my takeaway from listening to fellow commissioners is it's too big. There's a lot of scale issues from a massing standpoint, you got to really think through. And then there's beyond our reaction to just drawings on a page, we got to understand the context. And they can really be a good resource for you all as you work through that. So I'd really
Right.
encourage you to do that. And if we need to do a site visit, we do it for people when they ask. I think we'd be happy to do that. We've got 3 on Miles Manor tonight,
Right.
including yours. So we've all been out there. It is very easy to view because it is right on the corner. But if it helps for us to go out there and look at it, I think that's great. I would just say you're going to have to put the pencil to the paper with staff and really work. They will be great teammates for helping you find something that is going to get in line with the guidelines, I think. So that's my takeaway. Okay. Anything else from anybody else on this one?
One more thing I would say that just occurred to me. I mean, parts of doing Tudor, but to simply do the most defining features of the Anderson house on another brand-new house, to me, that underpins a subdivision mentality. So to differentiate, so each one of the houses are unique, which that neighborhood thrives on that.
Okay. All right.
So what's the best way to set up a meeting with y'all to,
I think if you'll reach out, if you'll reach out to Emily or Elizabeth, or Kelly, they can coordinate and get you a time and.
And we can pull in other staff members within our Building and Neighborhood Services Department that they can review it. And if you provide us the plans ahead of time, then we can allow them to review it and they can have comments if it, the size. More information will be required for us.
okay.
But yeah, we can definitely set up a meeting.
And that is what's set back too on that side with the other courtyard, kind of in that realm of things too. We can discuss that.
Yes, so that was zoning had provided, that was a project consideration from zoning of getting the setbacks and where that house is going to be located on the plot.
Okay.
Staff would suggest setting up this meeting before any additional design work is done.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I think that's a great.
Yep.
Call, because if you figure out, hey, we've got a setback and you are going to have setbacks all around.
Oh, yeah.
These are not flexible, or you're going to have to go try to get some variance or something, which is more difficult. At
Right.
least you know what you're working with.
For sure.
Yeah.
Okay.
But staff will follow up with an email.
Okay.
Great.
Thank you.
Elizabeth. Thank you. Okay. If it's okay with the group, we've got one more, and then we have on Miles Manor, and then we have item 10, and I'm happy for us to take a comfort break after. But if everybody's okay to go through the Miles Manor one, that'd be great. Okay, so the next item is discussion of an addition principal building at 121 Miles Manor Court. Mr. Cash. No, it's not.
Good evening.
But I'm reading who's on here.
I'm Noel Jones.
Yeah.
Their general contractor.
Perfect.
And we're here tonight to see if you guys like the design of a proposed 3-foot bump out on the kitchen and mudroom portion of the house. They added an additional window on each side of the addition. They would like for us to go to historic zoning and request this additional 3 feet for the size of the kitchen primarily.
Okay, all right. This one's Emily.
Thank you. So on the screen is kind of some current images of the site that the applicant provided to me. So here's one of them. Here's just an alternate, just kind of shimmied over just a little bit. Here's kind of the same angle, but kind of like projecting a different angle. Kind of a different angle too. And then the final angle. So this property, like Noel said, it includes the conversion of an approved deck that will front Mayberry Road into a 3-foot addition that will equate to 68 square feet. Previous proposals included large additions to the building, and the design was refined to minor alterations to the building, which was approved by the Historic Zoning Commission. While the footprint has not been included within the application, the design guidelines recommend sizing the overall building footprints of all portions of the existing principal building, accessory structures, and proposed additions on the lot so it does not exceed 35% of the lot. Staff did want to comment that the addition is minor and the approved porch area will decrease and the house addition will be minimal. Thank you.
All right. Bob, you have any comments?
No, I'd like to hear other commissioners first.
Okay, very good. Brian?
So this does not increase the amount over for the addition. So we're good. So it's actually decreasing some part and then increasing this?
So it was a portion of the deck. So I'll zoom in for us. So the deck was this whole kind of portion. And so the proposal is to kind of eliminate some of the deck. And so kind of this kind of hatched in area will be an addition of like actual building. So it's only 3 feet in width and 63 square feet.
And as far as percentage of, like what was there existing, usually we say no more than 50%. I don't remember on this one how much we went over.
That ship sailed years ago. I'll just say this was one of the fights of the century to save this house, and it was before historic zoning. There is an addition that already that far exceeds anything you would have approved to the original house, but it's there.
And so when it came before historic zoning, some of the alterations like window configurations and this deck and some other minor things were approved, but I believe that the square footage was not approved. I believe there was a different alteration proposed. Let's see. I have a photo.
If I could just clarify one thing you said, Emily, the kitchen and mudroom currently occupy that porch that was on the back. That pergola that you see reduced in size was part of the approved addition on the house. But this square footage that they're requesting is new additional square footage outside of that existing porch that was there previously. Does that make sense?
So it's an additional 63, if I've got it right, square feet
Yeah,
that was not
additional
previously approved.
3 lineal feet beyond what the old porch was.
Right, and
But there was no additional square footage allowed outside of any roofed area previously because of that 2006
Right.
addition.
So this is actually where the addition of additional square footage was not approved previously. This is now asking for 63 feet more.
Correct.
Yeah.
And what I'd like to know from that is the reason, what's going on that actually prompted that, the Cashes to want to have that 63 square feet?
Part of it was the kitchen size, they realized is just pretty small for their family of 7. And then one of the big drivers is that if they proceed with the pool, that would be to the top of that drawing where the patio currently is, she would have a hard time seeing the kids in the pool where the windows were pushed up closer to that fireplace on the patio. This would allow a better view of her from the kitchen looking out toward the pool, and that's one of their big concerns.
And there is and I think it's showing there, we did approve also that accessory structure as well.
Yes.
So, I'm sorry, I'm going out of turn, but I'll just go ahead and finish my thought. It's where you're bumping out that rear portion of the home 3 feet, you're shrinking the porch a little bit, but you are getting the 2 buildings closer together. Because the accessory structure, I don't think was shown on some of the sketches we had.
Correct. They're considering that as a further down the road phase.
Sure. Okay. All right.
Emily, could you bring up the image again that shows the floor plan and then the exterior with the red line? There it is. And could we see the image of the actual facade of the home? Like, just scroll up some. I mean, on that actually shows the floor plan. If you would scroll up on that drawing, it shows what it would look like from the exterior with that addition, that 2-story addition. That's it right there. And what I was trying to actually see from that is the symmetry. Does adding that extra 63 square feet help the symmetry of that bump out? And, it seems like it does.
Mary, anything else from you?
Well, I don't, the way this is situated, for some reason, I don't think 3 more feet is going to be any kind of negative impact or do any harm. So I would be supportive.
Okay. Lisa? Yeah, I don't have a negative reaction to that. I do think it'd be helpful when and I appreciate the candor just saying, yeah, like we didn't get any more square footage before, now we're actually asking for it. But I think it'd be helpful to see this side view with the accessory structure that we approved.
Okay.
Just so we can see how it's kind of shrinking that porch a little bit with the pergola. But it's a pretty big lot too, as I recall.
Yes.
So
I think also just real life pictures are honestly more forgiving. So I would bring those. A real life of kind of how you look at the front of the house, kind of a three-quarter view and then
Oh,
the
okay.
long.
Kind of from the corner of Mayberry and
Mm-hmm.
Miles Manor. Okay.
I was having a hard time wrapping my head around all of this for that 3-foot bump out. That's why I didn't.
Yeah, no, that's
have any-
okay.
And then I also was, as I drove by today, I was like, oh, this is the side of the house.
Right.
This is not the front, so.
And this is a project we spent a lot of time on.
But everybody's okay with the 3 windows to the right of the 2 windows as an acceptable design for that additional 3 feet? Okay.
I think it works.
Yeah, all right, that's good. Okay.
Thank you.
All right, thanks. Okay, we are on to item last.
Are we taking?
We're going to take a break if I think that would be the kind thing to do.
I do too.
So, should we say we'll come back at 6:20? Does that give us enough time? Everybody enough time? Okay, very good. We'll be back at 6:20. Thanks. Yeah, yeah, there's my dad saying the opposite. Demolition and new construction at 230 Franklin Road, the factory. Mr. Gamble, it lists your name.
I'll
Yeah.
let Benton
Well,
kick us off.
Yeah, I hope we can correct the text. We don't really see this as demolition. This is more rehabilitation.
And before we get started, I think what the plan for this one, because it could be a long one, is if you all can try to get your presentation done in 20 minutes.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Then we're going to let staff do it and in less time, see if they can beat you. But we'll take as
Great.
much time as we need. But if we can kind of aspire to that. And then I thought we would break it down into alteration from feedback from us, just so it's clear, alterations to the existing buildings is kind of part one. And then we're going to do yours all together and staff's all together, but from us, we'll go through and give that feedback. And then part two will be the proposed new construction.
Great,
That's
yeah.
what
Yeah,
we're
no.
aspiring to.
Yeah, we're on the same page. So, yeah, we see this as three parts. So there's the rehab of Building 9 and the rehab or renovation of Building 10. And then there is a partial demo of modern structures on Building 10. And then the third is the hotel, which is going to go through the development plan process, and we're going to eventually look to you all for recommendation to BOMA and Planning Commission. So the first two follows this is the third DRC we've had on Buildings 9 and 10. The first one, we came with the structural analysis of Building 9, which has been rehabbed about 22 years ago by Calvin Lehue. So rebuilt the structure. Some of you all saw it in the site walk DRC as well. The site walk DRC, we had gotten feedback from the State Historic Commission staff, and then we had a little bit more context with a master plan for the hotel to show you how it would all work. And then we looked at the Building 9 itself and Building 10 so you could see and touch and kind of understand how it's been kind of modified to a point where it's really not recognizable. I mean, it started as a pole barn. It's probably about 80 years old, I think, as best we can tell. So it's outlived its useful life as a pole barn, and it's been retrofitted, and it's still just kicking the can down the road. The structure is a mess. We cannot put a modern use in it. And so that was one of the discussions of what do you do with it? How can you reuse it? How do you deal with it? Staff at Historic Zoning, at Tennessee Historic Commission told us that they did not like replicas. And so that at one point we were talking about, well, do we rebuild it in kind? They do not like replicas. Conversation was more along the lines, this was an informal phone call, and the conversation was more along the lines of, can we pay homage to this building in scale, massing, and how can we kind of respect it in a way, but also note that this needs to be modified for modern uses. So now this third one, we're coming in. We've got done more work on the hotel, and we've got Neil Parker with Stonehill Taylor, who is our architect, and his team has really been working on this and has really done a great job of working around these buildings to really respect them. We thought that we might have to remove more at one point, and so anyway, we'll talk about that, and it's all with the context of what's coming. So, and Greg, if you...
I'll jump in there. On May the 23rd, Thursday night, the Planning Commission approved and adopted Envision Franklin. The factory district is now a component of Envision Franklin. As a result of the adoption of Envision Franklin and the factory district, this language was added. Uses at the factory of Franklin should include local commercial and light industrial uses with an emphasis on art and culture. A hotel may be an appropriate use on this site if carefully designed to complement and support the historic factory buildings. We are exploring that now. We discussed with you at the last DRC the practicality of Buildings 9, Buildings 10. How can we be creative in rethinking those structures in a way that we can rehabilitate those to be complementary to the existing factory that's there now, but also potentially this hotel use. And so that's one of the things that we're exploring. We would like to have aligned with the Historic Zoning Commission vote, and kind of as we go forward, consideration of Building 10, consideration of Building 9, and your recommendation to the Planning Commission on the development plan proposal. We know that with a development plan proposal, that includes a neighborhood meeting. We've got to have that. We haven't done that yet. These DRC meetings are kind of all of those things leading up to the start of that development plan. With the development plan, we're going to be asking that hotel use be included as a part of the planned development district for the factory. We're going to be changing the design of the parking lot area to meet current code. We're going to be changing the stormwater management of the factory to meet current code. So there's more to it than just the hotel, but we're kind of eating this elephant a little at a time. And so tonight's discussion really is about continuing the conversations about buildings 9 and 10. We want to continue to get input and feedback on that, but also about the location, massing scale, et cetera, of a potential hotel for the factory itself. So Neil, I'm going to turn it over to you and kind of walk everybody through our ideas here.
Okay, thanks, Craig and Benton. So in preparation for this assignment, we came to Franklin and we spent 3 days here, and Benton and Reed and the team at Holiday curated, and especially Karis, the factory historian, curated a wonderful trip that we saw many of the really impressive sites here, and I was particularly struck by how there's a lot of beautiful structures in the town that many towns of this size in this kind of area, in the South have beautiful buildings in them, but Franklin has a unique ability to have preserved them, and I really appreciate that. Anyway, we're not speaking to the slides. Okay, so
yeah, you can go to the next slide.
If you could just go through these.
Which one do you want to start on?
Presentation one. I think this is a supplement.
This is the
Go to the one above that. Yeah, there you go. That's the condensed.
So we looked at the site from the point of view of the factory. We were very fascinated with the factory. It's really a remarkable property, and we dove into a bit of the history of factories, and my own personal family history is my mother grew up in Detroit, and her father was working in the Ford plant there, and everything. In the time and motion studies that were done, and the development of factories, which kind of reached their peak here in America, it all came back down to basically linear buildings. Factories really make sense when they're linear, because a piece of goods gets worked on in a linear process, and then it starts at one end and ends at the other. So we found that was echoed here in the factory itself. And so our site being at the kind of meeting place in the middle between the factory and the parking, we thought that the best way to deal with this was to use the hotel building as a gateway from the parking lot to the factory, because the factory has a proper entrance from the west, but it really doesn't have one from the east. And so that was an important goal. We wanted to recognize and capture the iconic elements that already exist in the water tank, the smokestack, and the front of with the Dortch sign and all that. And there's a really nice view west, kind of at the factory roof level, so that was important. And basically, we found that if we oriented the building in a north-south direction and put it beside Building 9 instead of kind of over Building 9 or over part of Building 9, but actually try and preserve Building 9, you know, its location right in its spot and rehabilitate it with uses that are compatible. Unfortunately, it can't really be used as an actual interior building because it's just not compatible with fire codes and structurally it's highly deficient. But it does have an interesting rhythm to it. I think we can go to the next slide. So the Building 9 is built on a structure of wooden posts, I think they're 6 by 6, on 12-foot bays, which is really quite interesting because it's actually, that's the perfect dimension for a hotel room. And so we thought that actually echoing Building 9 in the 12-foot dimension, you know, so that the windows would kind of correspond with Building 9. And we wanted to use Building 9 for like an essential function of the hotel, but we couldn't make it really an indoor one as it is. So we basically decided that if we put the hotel perpendicular to the linear length of the factory, that makes kind of an entrance to the factory. It also says that beyond that, the hotel is the factory zone, and the hotel is not because it's contrary to that east-west orientation of the factory. So I think we can move into the next slides. So we've organized the hotel to basically be a lower scale as it's compatible with the height of the factory, and even lower than Middle 8 and Jameson Station. And then it steps up as you move away from Liberty Turnpike. So we have two schemes we're going to show you here. So this is the first one. I think, do we have the next one is like more of a close-up of Building 9? Okay, so this is showing where the hotel is peeking out at the back. This is a view from Franklin Road and Liberty Turnpike, and so you can kind of see the gables of the hotel at the far back. Now the next slide is moving a little closer to where you're near the west front. You can see a little bit more of the hotel, but you can see how the front of the hotel is in scale with the factory.
Here's your next slide.
Yeah, oh, great, okay.
There you go, it's up
Yeah.
on the screen now.
So now, so this is the entrance to the hotel, the driving entrance. And and again, that's Liberty Hall on the left, so you can see the kind of correspondence of the porte cochere that you drive under with Liberty Hall. The porte cochere is designed to be like, there's a portion of Building 12, no. 14? There's that extension where the conveyor belt, overhead conveyor.
Building 8.
That's Building 8, yeah, the wood one, the one with the heavy timber, where that conveyor actually goes out under a cover, so this was.
If you remember, we preserved that, that was, we came through the years.
Yeah. We've got one of the stairs that serves as the fire exit also serves for a secondary entrance up to a food and beverage facility on outdoor food and beverage on the second floor. And we've developed a courtyard in between Liberty Hall and the hotel that we see as the sort of front yard of the whole complex. We didn't want to sort of glue right up to the factory because we wanted to give the Liberty Hall some breathing space. But you can see there at the end of that kind of front yard is the face of Building 9. So we preserve that face. Well, we'd actually have to kind of constructed in place because there's a lot of, you know, we have to make sure they're well fastened and all of that, all the wood planks.
Right now, there's about a 3.5 to 4 foot raised area. It's
Yeah,
kind of like
yeah.
a building foundation area there. That whole area would come down, now it would be at grade. And Building 9 in this scheme, that elevation that you're seeing is the elevation that's there today. We're talking about keeping
Yeah.
it where that it is, just replacing the materials that have outlived their lifespan.
Right.
That pad was built by Calvin, by the way, about 20 years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I think one of the next slides gets into Building 9. Well, actually, the next slide is rotating around to the east, the southeast
one more.
view. You could go one more slide. Yeah, okay, so you're starting to see how one of the other features is that we've actually introduced a gap in the building at grade where you can actually enter the factory complex by passing through the hotel without actually ever entering it. It's an outdoor passage.
That was a key aspect that we wanted them to preserve that walkway, that pedestrian alley. So it's a continuous passageway,
And-
so the hotel's not one.
Yeah,
There
I
used to
mean-
be a rail spur actually that came off the rail line and ran alongside the factory, that whole pedestrian area there. So leaving this kind of open air through the hotel, it's kind of reminiscent of where that train used to drive through.
I mean, it's really the key whole thing to the factory. That's how all the materials came in, and that's how all the finished goods went out. So we saw preserving that as essential, and we're considering recalling the railroad tracks in one manner or another.
Underneath the hotel, in the pedestrian hardscape, bringing back those railroad tracks
And potentially even maybe in the parking lot.
yeah.
Okay, we can go to the next. So there you see it from the west. Well, the parking lot is in the back. So there's a central 5-story portion, and then it steps down to the porte cochere, which is 2 stories on Liberty Turnpike, and there's a 4-story portion stepping down towards the north. So in the foreground, you can see the pedestrian alley. I mean, pedestrian alley, it's really a lot more picturesque than that, you know? And the only alley aspect of it is this kind of wonderful way that the goods used to come in and out. But that used to be central.
Now,
So
where is the 5, the 5 portion is where?
The 5-story.
Just in the middle.
the
So
middle.
Where the little, okay, I got it.
Yeah, a lot of the, you'll see the same elements in 2 scenarios. There's one with 5 and one with 4, and it's all about the setback and how we're managing that. But most of the elements are the same, they're consistent.
Yeah. So for Building 9, you can see that the first bay, the first 12-foot structural bay is preserved exactly as it is. It's really, you're seeing it linearly there. And then the next several bays is repurposed as the pool. So we would construct the sides of the building, I mean, rehabilitate the sides of the building, but cut out the center so that we can have a pool there. And it's kind of reminiscent of a Roman bath. So that's like a very kind of resort feel. Also, I was very inspired by, at Carnton, did I get that right? Yeah. Sorry. Carnton Plantation, there's this wonderful, I think it used to be the golf building there, but they have a beautiful courtyard there. It's 2 sides of colonnade, and then the other 2 sides are a hedge. It's really, the proportions of that, I think, could be really quite similar, you know, at Building 9. And then we would basically erect the outline of Building 9, which is with its 12-foot bays, to fill out the rest of the footprint. So I think that's more or less it. Oh, Building 10. So this, that's a good. Building 10, we are preserving and using it for hotel functions. It's mostly inside of the hotel would be built around it, but some of it sticks out. And potentially it can have a relationship with this front yard of the, what we see, things like concerts going on there, or fairs, or any kind of outdoor activities that could be accommodated there. But Building 10 is kind of in this interesting position where it both addresses that front yard and also protrudes into the hotel, and has the building constructed around it, and which is kind of interesting given Building 10's own history of having been a building within a building before. I think, what's the next one? Yeah, let's go into the next couple of slides. So, I think the next slide is more or less what I already covered. In the southeast view, you can really see the that memory of the railroad track and the pathway through the building. And then the next slide covers the various heights of both of the existing factory, of the planned Middle 8, and of Jameson Station. But you can see that the Porte Cochere is slightly shorter than Liberty Hall, and then it steps up as you get quite a bit away from Liberty Turnpike. The next slide shows it in relationship to Jameson Station, and the following slide to Middle 8. You can see that that much of the factory of the hotel is actually shorter than Middle 8.
And I know we have one commissioner that has to be gone by 7, so I want to make sure you have the benefit of comments.
Oh.
So we can, I'm not trying to cut you short.
No, thank you.
But I'm just
Thank you.
trying to make sure you get the benefit of the feedback.
Setbacks, because that's really the
In plan.
two scenarios.
Yeah, so we have another scheme here that only goes to 4 stories, so that's the next one. You can see, if you compare the two site plans, we get 4 stories. We are able to lower that middle portion by extending slightly further forward and closer to Liberty Turnpike. It's still well within the setbacks, but you can see that we are
The Hattie B's building.
we are not as far south as Hattie B's.
Right.
So to compensate for the lower height, you're just increasing the footprint, is what I'm hearing.
Exactly,
Okay,
yeah.
gotcha.
Mhm.
All right.
So I think the same commentary applies to this one, so you can go through the slides, but really, it's all the same.
And we can definitely talk more. I'm not trying to
Yeah.
cut you off. I just
No,
want you
no,
to have the benefit of her comments, so.
I appreciate that. So I think I've pretty much said it all.
Yeah. Okay, great. Now, should we maybe, Emily, can you give kind of the high level, and then we can get Lisa's comments and we can come back if we need to?
Can you go forward to this slide just so that they can better understand the 4-story? Just keep on going down. There you go.
That one?
That's a little bit better. There, can you see the 4-story, and then it transitions to the 3, and then the 2-story overhang drive-through drop-off for the hotel?
Yeah.
I want to make sure that you understand the differences between the two schemes. Can you go 2 more slides forward? Keep going. Okay, this is from the parking lot angle where you have the 4-story along the back. And then if you go one more slide, you can see here building 9. And then that, from the first scheme that we showed, that pop-up in the middle, that's gone. Okay.
Right. Yep. Okay.
Okay, I'll be quick.
No, and we can circle back. I just wanted to have the benefit of Lisa's reactions.
Okay. So the factory at Franklin's composed of over a dozen buildings and structures utilized by several industrial manufacturers starting in 1929. This site was listed in the National Register of Historic Places in 1997, with the property being associated with events that have made a significant contribution to the broad pattern of commerce and industry. Envision Franklin was recently updated, and it states that the maximum building height for new development on both sides of Liberty Pike should be 3 stories with a recessed 4th story, but it should transition in height to the lower scale historic buildings along Franklin Road. The 5-story option doesn't meet Envision Franklin, and in pursuing that option would involve a planned amendment application, a neighborhood meeting, and a public hearing at the Planning Commission. The design guidelines specifically apply to properties in the historic preservation overlay. For this review, staff is applying the new commercial building recommendations, which provide height recommendations in 2 ways. The first is for established areas, where the height of new buildings should be consistent with the height of all historic buildings on the same block face by designing buildings to be within 10% above or below the average height of the historic buildings on the same block face. The second is for larger redevelopment areas, which recommends no more than 2 to 3 stories, and a height of the new building should transition to be within 10% of height of any adjacent historic buildings through the use of building stepbacks of 20 feet from the stories below, dividing the building into smaller parts to reduce effective visual bulk, and/or utilizing other techniques that break up the scale of the building. Because the proposed new building is situated so close to the factory buildings, as part of the site and setting of the historic factory buildings, staff would apply the height for established areas. The only historic buildings on the same block face are the factory buildings. The tallest part of the factory building is 43 feet, 3 inches, and the proposal at 4 stories is 60 feet and 3.5 feet. No, sorry, 60 feet and 3.5 inches, and 5 stories is 71 feet 3 inches. The average height of the buildings that were included within the submittal, not including the smokestack or the water tower, equates to approximately 36 feet. New guidelines recommend the following for new commercial buildings: that new buildings should be secondary in prominence to the historic structures on the site or in the district. New buildings should not block the view of historic buildings from public view sheds so that the historic buildings retain their prominence. Design the massing and scale of buildings to be consistent with the historic buildings on the block face. Align the architectural features of the new building with those of nearby historic buildings, including floor-to-ceiling heights, cornice alignment, window and door heights, and foundation. One should respect the streetscape character by creating compatible patterns and rhythms of architectural features along the street. The other major part of this proposal is the proposed demolition or the alterations of the 2 buildings. Buildings 9 and 10 on the site will be extensively altered and incorporated into the design of the new building. It is unclear on the level of demolition that is being proposed to these buildings that are listed as contributing in the National Register of Historic Places. It is unclear if the current open-air structure that is utilized for the farmers market will need to be demolished, as it may be positioned in the same vicinity as the proposed new development. When the proposal to demolish Building 9 came before DRC in November, the design guidelines, DRC members, and the State Historic Preservation Office did not support the demolition of the building. The state provided feedback that the building was considered contributing to the site, as it appeared that some of the past work was done under a tax credit project and therefore was approved as meeting the standards. While more work has occurred since then, the state determined that the building is still contributing, as it still retains its historic features. Buildings 9 and 10 are considered to be contributing to the factory. Staff will need to consult with the State Historic Preservation Office staff to understand if the open-air facility is contributing and if the level of removal and replacement of the elements to the existing Building 9 to see if it will be considered contributing if the majority of the building were to be replaced and the roof remain exposed to have a pergola effect. Staff would like the DRC to provide feedback in 2 areas. The first being the demolition and partial demolition of 2 contributing historic structures, and 2, the form, scale, massing, and placement of the proposed building.
Thank you. Record time, thank you.
I tried to be
Okay.
speedy.
Lisa, since, yes, I want to make sure we get your thoughts, so. No. It's fine, it's not an inconvenience.
Kelly, if we could pull up this south elevation.
What page is it?
Yeah, I was looking for a page. It has a 1 with a circle around it. And it's not one of the blue sky pictures, but it's one of the renditions that shows the view along
Liberty.
Liberty.
Yeah.
Could it be the 4-story option or the 5-story option?
Either, well, let's do the 4-story option.
Okay. You tell me when to stop.
Right.
I actually think it's maybe the other way, the other direction.
Going the other way.
That one does it for me.
Here, it's just, I won't.
It's not the
get
blue
obsessed.
sky, I don't think.
Yeah,
I
I
think
won't
it's
get
just,
obsessed about it, but the reason that this one is so telling to me is because of the height of the hotel in relation to the factory. I mean, the applicants have done an there, yeah, that's the
Yeah.
one, on the bottom. Okay, so that's the 4-story option, and then we can just picture what the 5-story option would look like. But, yes, certainly, when you compare the height to Jameson Station or the Middle 8, then it's more proportional, correct? But, as Emily pointed out, we're comparing this strictly to the factory. And in that picture, it's clear to me that it's inconsistent in both mass and height. I know you've worked very hard to incorporate some of the history, and I love the courtyard idea, and just very creative approach to all of this. But there is something so massive and so modern about this that will never, in my opinion, fit the context of the factory, which I'm sorry to say that, but the factory, after we've studied it for all these years and been there on many site visits, it's clear to me that it truly is a gem, and that if something like this were to enter that area, it would diminish the historic nature of the factory. That's my comment.
okay. Thank you. All right, so, Emily, is there anything else you wanted to weigh in on before we start going around? I know we made you do kind of an abbreviated piece, but
That was it.
You got
I
it.
did want to say that incorporating the kind of the railroad spur line is such a great idea, and it's seen at the interurban trail at Harlansdale, and it's going to be at Bicentennial Park. So that's a great thing to include, and we just wanted to comment on that.
great. Okay, Mary, would you like to go next?
I'm going to support the height that is within 10%. I think it's exciting that we're getting a hotel there, but I hate for the whole character of that factory area to get overwhelmed. I think this is just overwhelming of it. So I would like to see something that's more compliant with our planning documents.
Emily, could you show the 4-story option too, elevation, just so are you talking about both?
The 4-story you said was how tall?
Emily's got that, I think.
When you talk about the height, one of the things to be aware of is that the ridge, it's a very shallow slope roof.
Yes.
And the ridge is really not what you see. It's really
I
the-
know that, but that's
the-
how you read buildings. Everyone tries all the time to come say that you can do this and it's going to look like that. because of the tallest point. It just doesn't read that way. It will read taller, a store, it would read taller.
Did you have that height, Emily?
Yes, so 4 stories is 60 feet and 3.5 inches.
And the factory,
The tallest part of the factory building is 43 feet, 3
Yeah.
inches.
And the
So-
average is?
If you were to take the average of all of the buildings with all the measurements that were provided within the application, it would be approximately 36 feet.
okay. Well, what I'm saying, if you do go to the ridge line, 43, when you do this, it's still going to look taller. Now, I would probably go along with that, but it will still read taller. That's just common sense.
So the factory is mostly made up of pitched roof buildings. Would it be more sympathetic then to go with a flat roof on the hotel?
Possibly.
Because that would lower that
Possibly.
ridge point
Possibly.
by a lot,
And
by 12 feet.
Right. I
13.
think we want the factory to be the star.
Mm-hmm.
And I think when you have that big, tall element, it's fun and it's exciting looking. But I think that even provides more competition. I think the entrance on the Liberty Pike side is more competition, could be calmed down. So those would be my initial comments.
Can you go to the next slide for us?
Mary, did you have any comments on the alterations to the buildings, the proposed alterations to the existing buildings?
I'm probably going to be, for the big picture, personally, this moment, how I feel is I'd be a bit more flexible on that. Because if you're just looking at the whole big picture, I would have, that would be where I would be more flexible.
Okay. Brian?
And let me weigh in on that too, since that's the topic currently. There's a lot of challenges to those buildings. I mean, even with over time, the deterioration. And I think an adaptive reuse that's successful is something I can support too in those areas. I have to also echo what everybody says about height. I mean, we really have to be sensitive to height at this location and maybe within that 10%, but what we're seeing now is, it just overwhelms the factory. And we consider in our guidelines, we consider the block face. So we're not really considering what's across the street. We're considering the block face of the factory. And I would say, and I think you probably realize this already, but using the fire escape for signage, I don't see our guidelines supporting that either. I know we haven't brought that up, but it's on the drawings, and I just thought I would. So question I have, so you see multi-pane windows that show like the first and second and maybe even third stories. And what's on the fourth story? How is that being interpreted as far as how the windows are actually done? That's another floor? It's just have the windows are in a different configuration.
Yeah, the windows are a different configuration, right? It's just, that would sort of lighten the kind of overall look of the thing. Plus it recalls the clear stories that are part of, such a significant part of the factory.
Yeah, I think that's a very nice touch to what you're doing. I would say though, as far as flat roof, I mean, I would not like to see a flat roof. It really gives you the impression of a modern hotel. That you see a Hampton Inn or anything else like that. It's just a flat roof with a parapet. I think where you're going with that is more in keeping with what you see at the factory.
All right, Bob?
I wanted to ask staff, with the 10% you were talking about, would that allow for a 4-story?
So Envision Franklin does allow for 3 stories and the 4th being recessed. So kind of like what was approved, Middle 8, and even Jameson Station, they all utilized a recessed top floor. And so that would be appropriate within Envision Franklin and the design guidelines. But for this site, it is contextually sensitive to the historic buildings and having them kind of be the star of the show and kind of step those back, and so that it doesn't compete with the new buildings compared to the historic buildings.
Okay. Well, I like the look of the four-story. I like the industrial look. I can kind of think in my mind that back part of the factory, and right now, the front part is such an integral part of Franklin Road. I see the back part kind of, everything kind of tapers off into a parking lot. So, which it does, but I like the concept of having a hotel there. I like it from the aspect of having another hotel in the downtown area. I like it from the concept of Franklin as a destination, the factory as a destination. So, you know, all the other things that might be conflicting, the whole concept part, I really like.
Okay. Brian, oh, I did have a few comments, but, okay. So if I'm understanding it correctly, and I may screw this up, if you move the building, and this may not be anything that is your goal, but I worry about that popping up there at the back, because the factory to me is massive and sprawling and lots of different things, but not in a height standpoint. You know, you've got a few beacons that come up, but the massing that I feel when I look at these proposals is height. And I'm sure it's going to look massive from different angles and more of a sprawl. That bothers me less than the height piece. And if we're looking at it from 10% or whatever the percentage is coming off the average height of the block face, which is of the historic buildings in the block face. We were talking about this on another project earlier. The average in the block face of the historic structures, not the new structures. And the block face is that side of the road, not what's across the road. That's pretty limiting when you look at the guidelines and you are butting it right up against the historic buildings. If you move it away and move it closer to the train tracks and thought about it that way, then I think there's a different option for how that's tested as far as your development standards. Because I want to hear you, but let me just get my thought out. Because then you're closer to the new development next door. I think it could be less impactful to the historic structure. I think there could be more flexibility pulling it away. I can understand why maybe you wouldn't want to do that, but I worry that this is going to dominate, and Liberty is, just from my view, just as important as Franklin Road, that view shed. So that has been, when I look at it, that worries me about the massing and the height piece, especially in line with our guidelines. And the 5-story is great to talk about it, but as I understand it, that can't even happen absent a Vision Franklin revision. Right. But everybody will correct me if I get that wrong.
Well, and this is 3 stories and step back to 4.
That's what it's supposed to be, right?
Yeah.
That's exactly right. So that, I feel like, if you were at 3 stories, step back to 4, and you were pulled back, and maybe I'd hate it when I saw it and think it didn't fit the massing, but from an effect on the historical resource, that feels like you may have more flexibility if you pull it away toward the train tracks, toward the apartments there. Yeah. I get why it may not fit what you're going for with the connectivity
Well, you
piece.
lose a ton of synergies.
I understand that.
And it kind of, in an almost in defeating way. Because it's what we have going on with the factory is so synergistic with what we want to do with this. The event space, synergizing with the hotel, conference room space, and I mean, this is a real opportunity to do something.
Yes.
Food and all that, and from a business perspective, all these small businesses that we have, I mean, they're kind of feeding on all this stuff, and it's just anyway, you want to have a nice pedestrian experience as
Yeah.
well.
I'm with you.
the-
I think the challenge I'm rubbing up against is we've got all those things, which are not really what we're supposed to consider
Sure.
when we're looking at the guidelines.
Well-
and so we are looking at the guidelines and saying, okay, the guidelines say if you're going to be in this area, it should be stepping up, well, 3 with a recessed 4th story, which we don't have on a plan, arguably, and then also these height based on average of the historic structure.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think we're doing a lot of stuff that's not meeting the guidelines, so we're coming here to talk about variances that we think are appropriate. And I guess I think Neil put it in a good way. I mean, there's kind of a conflict between, the height requirement in the guidelines and architectural elements that we think are significant and really have a good opportunity to, really shine and really, play off of the factory in a nice way. And those height requirements are kind of at odds. So if we were to go with a flat roof, I mean, you kind of get to just every garden variety hotel,
Yeah.
right?
I hear you
And
on
so,
that.
And the parking is a big part of this too. If we're having to move that footprint out into parking, then it starts to shift our balance. We're looking at more structured parking, and then you've got other elements that kind of come in with other buildings that come into play too. So, but the synergies are pretty significant. And then also how we deal with the buildings 9 and 10, and, this plan incorporates them in a way that's really useful, and it sets them as amenities where they can play off of the hotel. There's some rehab that we can do without kind of, going full replica or
Right.
doing something that, we know is just not going to sit
Yeah.
well.
I'm just giving you my
Yeah.
reaction to
No,
the massing
yeah.
piece.
No, that's
I had
absolutely.
one other question, then I'll kind of wrap mine up. So what about where the farmer's market presently operates? That would be proposed to come down based on this?
That would, yeah, that would, and so that's a modern structure. So that was built to house
Okay.
that use, and the long-term goal is to have that farmer's market in a different place. And,
Sure.
you all know the current one's leaving, and so, but we
But
would like to have
that
that use
structure
out.
would come down.
Uh,
That would have to, from
eventu-
where this is placed.
Probably.
Yeah.
Now, it's not in the footprint as we've designed it now.
Okay.
But, I think long-term, yeah, when we have to, if we trigger a site plan amendment that updates the parking lot, which we should, there will be tree islands and all that stuff and a new parking lot layout.
And the structure that we did the emergency tear, where is that in location of what's proposed? The one that just got approved last month?
It's planned south of so it's kind of off the plan. I don't know if there's a
site.
Okay.
Yeah, it's kind of just to the east of that porte cochere and that 3-story
Okay.
piece.
So it's not in the footprint of what's being
No,
proposed? Okay.
No. Yeah,
Okay.
what we're proposing is in more or less in line with the curb line as it is. I think we might have to go out a little bit of it, but generally keeping in the overall footprint. Of the
Got it. Okay, Brian, I'm sorry. Go for it.
No, I was just going to say that I think the location works. I mean, it's fine with what you're doing. The challenge is going to be lower the height and make the numbers work for the hotel. And I think that's where the challenge is going to be. And I'm wondering, we talked about more of the skylight kind of on the side of the building at the very top. And I'm assuming with this drawing, it's kind of flush with the wall. When it goes up, let's say you're 3 stories, and then you have that, it's still flush with the wall. If it were to step back, so you had your 3 stories, and then it steps
I
back.
see what you're saying. Clear
And I
story
think
stuff.
actually in the factory itself, don't the skylights kind of
They
step
do,
back?
Yeah.
And that might be a way to handle some of that too, but I think it's the height.
Yeah.
I can't really tell you how many stories to do, but it's the height part of it.
So more so than the setback, then is that?
And what more about the setback? You mean the setback on Fourth floor?
so-
If you look at the, you know, from Liberty Turnpike, it actually says in the, I think it's in Envision Franklin, but the document says things, it doesn't say that the setback, you know, how far a building, how close a building can get to the road. It doesn't say it's 25 feet, or it's 20 feet, or it's 30 feet. It just says it, an appropriate, or some language like that.
Well, aren't we referring to actually to the actual fourth floor, how far it sets back from the actual wall of the building?
Well, what Benton was talking about was the fact that we could trade height for extra length and still accommodate the volume we need to, you know, in order to make the numbers pencil out. And so if we could extend closer to Liberty Turnpike, down on the page, that would allow us a greater chance of being able to cut the height down by, you know, occupying more footprint. And with that, and then it might also, maybe we could tone down the porte cochere that way also. And so,
The setback we're talking about is the porte cochere too. So you bring up a point about which
I think
level
Brian,
and
yeah, I think
maybe we're
Brian's talking about the Envision Franklin. Now, I'm not trying to put words in your mouth, but Envision Franklin being 3 stories with a 4th story setback. I think that, but correct me if I'm wrong,
That would
not
be
a
setback.
setback from the
on
property.
all,
Right, and then,
all 4
Mr.
sides of
Chair,
a structure.
He's also, I think, trying to say, could that 4th story section, I think it would be a section, read as a clear story? Isn't that what you're trying to say,
Well, I think
Brian?
that's what they're already kind of showing
Yeah.
for their 4th story.
But it doesn't step
Step
in.
back.
That's right, it
And
would
that's
need to
what
step
you're
in.
trying to, I think, say.
It is, it
And
is.
that would accomplish the, at least the Envision Franklin 3-story,
Yeah.
4-story setback. I'm sorry, Kelly, you've got something for us.
Oh, it's all right. I just wanted to point out that this proposal exceeds the maximum number of keyed rooms that Central Franklin allows. And this
How many
has not
rooms?
been through the DRT, our departmental review team review. This is a very initial, but just wanted to point that out as well.
Well, I would say, I thought it was very smart of you and a couple of people, and you, Bob, to say, I'm generally for the concept. I just skipped over that and went right to the height, because I assume that it's a good use. I think having a hotel there, not at any cost, but I think it's a good concept. I think the pitched roof, I'm getting more and more a fan of it as I hear people talk. So I just was assumptive that it's a good use, but I think it is.
One other thing I'll say is, again, this just kind of reiterates, the factory is massive in a lot of ways, but it's massive in a low-slung way in my mind, and not a tall pop-up way. And so if there's any way to kind of lean into that, I think it's going to feel like it has less of an impact on the historic resource. So I don't know if that's, everybody talks about, or y'all keep talking about making the building longer toward Liberty. Maybe part of it's making it wider too. There are some now I realize you got windows for hotel rooms you got to deal with, but there are, a lot of those buildings feel very wide, especially the main building. So I wonder if there are ways you can kind of get there and lean more into the guidelines than this kind of pop up at the back of the. And the only reason I was saying maybe push it away is I think that gets you out of some of that. No more than 10% of the average height on the block face if it's in a redevelopment area, which I think that's going to feel more like a redevelopment area if you're at the other side of the parking lot.
So if widening the building and maybe pushing into a B9 footprint, would that change your way of thinking, or?
When you say pushing into a B9, you push.
So the building 9, we
Oh,
were
yeah.
trying to preserve generally the scale and massing too, so that was kind
The
of.
footprint.
Yeah, right.
I'm with
So, if we were to, I mean, is there some portion of that you could, push into to kind of, scale out the hotel building a little bit? I mean, I don't know
Maybe.
how much of it is sacrosanct. We're trying to generally preserve the massing, but.
There's nothing that says it has to read as just one big building either. I don't know if you all have studied that at all, but
Well, that's why we broke it in with
Yeah.
the different levels
Yeah.
of roof. We didn't want
Right.
it to seem like one
that's right.
massive-
And I like that idea.
The design concept we're currently seeing on the screen, what about your setbacks from that? Setbacks from Liberty? Or is that where your issue is concerned? Is this the fourth story?
Yeah, this is the fourth, and we were focused on setbacks in comparison to the existing factory building.
We kept it behind
profiles.
Hattie B's, but if that's not so important, that would definitely allow us to do some of these moves to lessen the height.
Yeah, in the back, it was lining up with building 8 and buildings 2 and 3 too. So,
But from what Kelly said, it sounds like there's some conflict already with number of keys. So there's a lot of other things to be worked out, I think, first, that may help you better define what's going on here.
Mr. Chair, does Kelly know the number of rooms allowed?
The maximum is 120 rooms in Central Franklin.
And this proposal is,
130.
Plus some other types of units.
No, we have amenity uses. We have a little bit of tucked under parking under the building.
I thought I saw some short-term vacation rentals on the plan.
Not in that building.
Not on the drawings.
No. That is a concept that we have talked about, not in this
There-
plan, no.
There are currently 5 apartments approved as a part of the PUD. 3 of them are recognizable as apartments today. And we'd love to have some opportunities for some vacation by owner. But I think there's another conversation with the zoning ordinance rewrite later on in the future that we wouldn't want to bring that conversation back to the table. Does that make more sense? Yeah.
From my perspective, I would have a real hard time seeing how, and I know 5 stories is not even contemplated right now. That would require an Envision Franklin change, it sounds like. I mean, I'm personally struggling with the 4 stories, given the height guidelines, because it's such a big jump already. So the whole taking it to the next step of 5 stories, I know that's going to take input and change by a body other than us, but I would have a hard time supporting that based on the guidelines that
I
we have.
think we prefer the 4. We were doing iterations where we thought it best to just show you kind of what we were looking at, and it had to do with setting back against some of the existing buildings. And so, yeah, I think that, we like the 4 where it's spread out a little bit more. We think it works
and
better.
I think you're hearing from us, we like 3.
Right.
So,
With a 4th setback, if we can get comfortable with
with
the
that,
heights.
yes.
Yeah. I mean, even looking at in my mind, when I knew Envision Franklin didn't permit the 5th story, I just kind of I didn't look at it as, I looked at it obviously, but then when I looked at the 4 story, that felt really tall given the guidelines for the project in the location in particular where you all propose it. So
I wonder if there's if you're setting back in all directions on the 4th floor at this point, then if that's doable with our floor plan, I mean, you're getting a little bit more space between the existing buildings too. I mean, some nominal. There is a good gap, and that's what the courtyard serves to do. And I mean, it's activating a lot of things. It's bookended by Building 9, which we like, and the rehab Building 9 facade, and then it gives space that we thought was appropriate to respect the existing buildings. And I'm just curious if you're doing that a little bit more, and then you're kind of playing with that height. The 10% benchmark may be tough, and so I'm curious if you're kind of combining all this, and there's some feel-good aspect of it, where you're respecting the buildings, and you're seeing it all in plane, and and we also think about I know Liberty Pike has a prominent elevation. The Franklin Road is pretty, we definitely want to respect that. That's kind of that really front of house, Harlansdale across the street. And so that's, you know, we see this as a little bit more in the back. And then you're also respecting it with the setback from the existing
Yeah, I don't see it
buildings,
as
too.
in the back. I'll just be real candid. Like, you've got more road frontage on Liberty than you do on Franklin Road. And obviously Franklin Road's iconic, but I would not, from my perspective, be treating this as back of house, even though I know it's back of house from Franklin Road.
Yeah, I would never say back of house.
I know.
Yeah, it's funny, we actually had an architect that said that he thought that every elevation of these buildings was back of house because it was designed as an industrial building.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
really, or back of house. Anyway, I guess I'm curious if you're, what is that kind of, is there some kind of feel good where you're like, okay, I mean, you're setting back, you've got some room between the historic buildings. It's really hard to hit the 10% benchmark. You know, I don't know the history of the 10% and if there's any type of, you know, arbitrary piece to that. But if, you know, we're doing it the best we can to provide some kind of, you know, reasonable scale in here. Is there a point where you might say, well, okay, I mean, it's close and it feels good and maybe it's a little bit over 10%? I don't know what that number is. I'm just asking.
I don't either.
Yeah, I think it's until you see it. It's
I
hard.
don't know.
I'll let
I was
everybody
going
else
to
speak.
ask you, how many square feet is this building?
I don't recall, I'm sorry.
Don't know.
I don't know offhand.
Okay.
I don't know.
That'd be a good thing to come back with.
All right.
85,000, maybe 85,000, something like that.
Anybody have anything else?
But I mean, we love the job that you all are doing and the synergy that the factory's bringing. And for you being here 4 days, plans were to demolish that building. So, thank goodness.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I know that we're talking about scale and all that stuff, and it seems to me that there has been very little conversation about buildings 9 and 10, which I kind of take that as a positive, that you like the direction that we're going with. I hope that's true.
Yeah, let's run
I'm
that
gonna-
through it for them, if y'all, whoever wants to go first.
And I'll reiterate, you know, that you've got to have a successful reuse of a historic structure, especially in that kind of condition. So I'm open to that. We will need to see more details about exactly what's going on. I mean, currently, we're just kind of seeing a concept. But I mean, I just would like to see more, when it comes to us, more details about it. But I'm not opposed to doing kind of what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Bob, do you have any? No. Okay. Mary?
Yeah, I'll go over there and just kind of think about it, but I've already said I'm going to have more flexibility there than I am building a huge, hotel that's too tall.
Okay.
Yeah, and I guess my reaction kind of to one of your comments is the flexibility on the 10%, how we are having some open space. Some of the open space that's being proposed is actually a building that isn't open, that you're proposing to open up to put the pool there. And so from my perspective, if the whole thing comes together, kind of, I think what I'm hearing from the other commissioners is there's willingness to be flexible about all that, and obviously got to make sure SHPO and all that, is in play. But treating that building that's then going to largely be open air, which today is not, as giving you some distance from the other historic structures, I think we can be flexible about that. Otherwise, it would be, well, you have a roof there and you've just chosen to take the roofing off. You still have the, I think there's some flexibility on all that to the extent staff confirms we're all okay in our guidelines and how we're handling it, and we all feel comfortable with that.
That's an interesting way to put it,
But I think that, that does give you some more distance if everybody leans into the changes you're proposing.
Yeah. Well, the historic use of Building 9 was an open air shed, right? I mean, it was roofed, but it was wide open.
Open air.
Right. And so that's what we're proposing to do, but with certain sections of the roof opening up, but the roof line being, yeah. Okay.
So-
Well, the interesting thing about the National Register documentation is they did note that building is contributing, but they did not note Building 1 is contributing, and that's the historic, administrative core.
Yeah.
That building was built at the same time. It's 90 years old. It has beautiful bones, historic wood, and non-contributing. So, there are errors that happen all the time, right?
That's right.
So, it's worth putting that in perspective, so.
That's right. And just to wind this up, Brian, if I'm right, we have heard tonight Jasmine Hall. We've heard Miles Manor, which I was told was built because the owners of Miles Manor, got so upset that the factory was built that they divided the front lawn into buildable lots. And all of this is evolving, and isn't that, it's amazing, the journey of land use development.
Yeah, sure.
And to wrap it up.
Yes.
So when I'm looking at the current drawing that's in front of us, my first reaction is that is a very long building where the
Yes.
hotel is concerned. Talking about the setbacks and this kind of thing. But it does kind of bookend. Because if you look at the very front of the factory, you see a perpendicular building.
Yes.
About the same width. And, it could be a bookend.
That's true.
So, those setbacks may be something to experiment with.
And I think that a wider bookend that is lower in height is more in keeping with the factory. But I understand you've got hotel rooms and windows that you've got to deal with, and we've got to deal with our guidelines, so. Okay, Bob, do you want to truly wrap it up? No. Okay, all right.
All right, good feedback.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We're adjourned.